She had said it was going to be a late night at the office. I remembered that first night well. 9:30 p.m. She still wasn't home. Was probably burning the midnight oil. The thought crossed me. In this sort of market, maybe that's fine. Jobs are a rarity. There are worse things than working hard. I forced myself under the covers, shut my eyes, and waited for sleep to take me. The next morning, when she wasn't splayed out beside me, I convinced myself she must have sauntered in at 11 p.m. and left at 6 a.m., having sprinted through her morning rituals before I'd even had time to separate the blinds. My first text to her was delivered at 8:48 a.m., sitting in the uncomfortable chair of my more uncomfortable cubicle. Work's really killing you, huh? A certain flavor of guilt washed over me when I realized I still didn't fully understand what her new job entailed. The title was Project Manager, but I always found the term nebulous. My mind shot back to words she'd mentioned when she discussed it: neural networks and visual processing. They were coming up on a big project deliverable. I nodded, of course. I'd always nod. I put the phone down and subjected myself to the minutiae of the day. A watched pot never boils, after all. Soon, I'd get distracted, forget about everything, and then I'd hear from her. Corporate bureaucracy held my attention for a few hours when my phone vibrated. I checked it immediately. A dumb meme from a friend I hadn't spoken to in ages. Great. Already I was willing to cave on the internal rule I'd set for myself to not think about it. I sent her a new text. Finally. Hey hun, where are you? And then called her too, for good measure. Her voicemail played. Hi, this is Ella, A. I cannot answer the phone right now, So you should try to call me back, yeah? Back, yeah. A. This is really sad. And then laughter as her sing-song Rihanna impression broke down and I heard the beep. I waited for the phone to buzz again, for a call back. Something. When there was nothing, the next thought was, is a good husband supposed to call the cops immediately when he doesn't know where his wife is? Or was I just overthinking things? I left work early and depersonalized the entire way home, speeding on the freeway, stuck in traffic, waiting for the light to change. Being colorblind, I go by traffic light position. Pulling into the driveway, all of it done with no real lucidity. At home, pacing back and forth in slippers on the hardwood floor. 6 p.m. turned to 7 p.m. turned to 9. I'd occasionally grab the remote, flip through some random streaming service, hoping something the all-seeing algorithm suggested might pull me away from my anxiety, but nothing did. So, when 10 p.m. rolled around, I called the cops. After a brief transfer, once I clarified that my situation was urgent, but perhaps not life or death urgent, the gruff voice on the other end of the line asked me when I'd last seen Ella. If this was unusual, and if she'd been going through anything recently, acting strangely, differently. Following my answer that yes, this was a little out of the ordinary, and no, nothing seemed off before today. He then got her car and license details from me, told me they'd ping her phone, and assured me they'd circle back as soon as they could, maybe even send an officer to my house. They were on it. In short words I found comforting before I realized that the boilerplate phrase was probably thrown around all the time by them. The bit of action I'd taken suddenly put my brain into motion. Coworkers. And yes, perhaps I was just overthinking, but still. Coworkers. I spent too long workshopping the text messages to James and Preeti. Her two colleagues, I'd met a couple of gatherings now. I wish people death when they cut me off in traffic, and yet I overthink sincerity in text to strangers. Maybe try therapy. her voice in my head. Not now, hon. I'm trying to find you. I sent the text. Hey James, I hope you're well. I was curious if Ella is still at the office. Pretty, basically the same text. Then back to waiting again. In the blur of anxious monotony, I melted into my sofa, twiddled my thumbs, and ordered a grand mocha frappuccino via DoorDash for $18 because it felt like a wise financial move. I watched the app as the little icon crept down the street. Jennifer, the driver, still had a few stops to make. A new text on my phone all of a sudden. Hi, is this Matt? To the jumble of numbers I didn't recognize but saw were from my area code, I responded, Yes, this is Matt. Before I could say more, the 3 typing dots appeared at the bottom of the screen, and the next messages came through in rapid succession. My name's Ken. Not sure if you remember, but I met you at bowling 2 months ago. Ping. My wife May works with Ella. They work on the same team. The bowling trip was organized by some of their co-workers. They allowed +1s. Ping. We had a WhatsApp group to organize heading there together. That's why I have your number. Hope you remember. I'm sorry for texting you out of the blue. I get it, Ken, and yes, I remember. Please get to the... Ping. My wife didn't come home last night from work. I tried reaching her co-workers. Friends, too. Everyone. No one knows where she is. Huh. I called him. It rang and it rang and it rang. I was just texting you. Please, for the love of all that is holy. Hello? He finally answered. Did any of her co-workers get back to you? I asked. What? You said you tried reaching her co-workers. Did they respond? Did they say they didn't know where she was? No, none of them got back to me. Do you think something happened? At work, maybe? I didn't like the words coming out of my mouth. I'll call you back, I said. I hung up, placed the phone down. Ken already calling back. I breathed in deep and Googled the address of the high-rise building Ella worked in. It was a new build. I remembered when she first told me about the job and the office she'd be working in. Babe, just look. There's a whole page about the amenities, she said. Sorry, I'm just slammed right now. All good. Didn't mean to bother. I'll look. Later I'll look. Promise. Of course, I didn't ever actually look. A knock at my door all of a sudden. Excitement and relief simultaneously. Before I opened it and saw the Starbucks bag on my doormat. Why would I do this to myself? Why would I spur hope like this? I grabbed the bag, brought it inside, returned to my laptop and steeled myself for any horrific articles about the building. No articles. I nonetheless wondered if it'd be worthwhile to go there, just to rule it out. Inaction would only make me spiral. Ken calling again. A few missed calls from him now at this point. Tunnel vision was making me a prick. I answered. Hi, I'm heading to the building, I said. Oh, he said. Okay. Then, want a carpool? I'm already en route. I lied. But, meet you there? Sure. I'll call you when you're... I hung up, headed to the car. Off the backdrop of the night, I thought about her. Ella had auburn hair. She listened to ABBA in her headphones when she vacuumed. Always ABBA. Her favorite thing was shoving her phone into my face to show me something she was convinced was funny when it absolutely wasn't. She loved astrology memes. She hated the beach. Why? I'm not entirely sure. Our marriage has been rocky lately. We'd been doing the counseling thing. It was less fighting and more distance. I suppose. The recent line she'd been repeating was that she'd always been willing to make sacrifices and change for our relationship. I hadn't. I've been fixed in place, unable to change. I secured my seatbelt, and as I did, I saw a new message on my phone from James, her coworker. DNO, not OCOME. Anxiety now. I texted him back to elaborate on his typo-filled note. I tried calling him multiple times. Radio silence. Heart palpitations now. I decided to start driving. I pulled into the expensive downtown parking lot surrounding the tower. Past the sea of dark headlights, I expected to see an inferno, or an explosion, something horrific. Instead, everything seemed fine, though it dawned on me that it was strangely hard to find parking. The lot was basically full, despite it being near midnight on a weeknight. I found purchase in a shadowy spot in the corner of the lot, parked, rushed out, sprinted to the building. Mid-sprint, I realized I'd passed Ella's car, her beat-up Toyota Camry. There it was, just sitting. Like an afterthought, I peered through the foggy backseat window to see if there was anything of note in the car. Nothing. But this did mean that either she'd left somewhere on foot, or more realistically, was still here, in the building. I continued on, the glass tower looming ahead, its windows dark and reflective. As I neared, it became clear most of the floors had their lights off, the shades drawn. Meanwhile, the sound of tires over gravel, another car circling the lot. My phone rang. Ken, again. I answered. "Is that you?" he said, as I saw the man in the car 2 lanes down with cell phone pressed to ear looking my way. "Yeah," I said. "Find parking. I'll meet you at the front of the building." I hung up, and then I was there, at the base of the steps. James' strange text back to the forefront of my mind. Concrete steps led up to a broad landing before the glass entrance of the building. Beyond the doors sat a barren but exquisite lobby. The abject emptiness of the lightless foyer sat rather strangely with me. "Hey," I heard Ken's voice call from behind. I continued my staring contest with the building. Then I called my wife again. Straight to voicemail. No ring this time. "Hi, this is Ella. I cannot answer the phone. Ken was beside me now, salt and pepper hair. I remembered our bowling excursion together, the story about him and May moving here from South Korea after he landed an amazing job. I also remembered just how crap I was at bowling. "Should we go inside?" he asked. "I think so," I said. Then a thought hit me. Late. I called 911 again. 911, what's your emergency?" "I called about my wife earlier, like an hour ago. Ella. I found her car. It's still parked where she..." And that's when I heard the blare of the sirens and saw police strobes flashing across the lot, government plates rolling in. "Sir?" the operator said. "Actually, I think you guys are already here." I hung up, just as the lady said, "What do you mean?" and watched with Ken as the cops arrived. He said. "What do you think happened?" "I don't know." A row of 4 police vehicles beelined right to the entrance. Ken and I backed up. He started calling his wife, panicked. His breath grew rapid as he waited for a voice on the other end that I could tell he knew wasn't coming. "May, call me back when you get this." I turned my attention to the new arrivals, spilling out of their vehicles, donning uniforms. 13 or so of them, pushed past Ken and myself, moved up the steps to the large space in front of the doors, and began stringing yellow police tape across the entrance of the high-rise, spreading out to hold the line. I saw a new crew, about 5 with tactical gear on, coming up right behind. "Ready to enter," I heard one of the men on the tactical unit say into the mic on his shoulder. He pulled open the glass entrance door, the lobby beyond swallowed by darkness, and stepped inside, 4 others filling in behind him. I tried to get a better look inside, but the view through the swung open door showed nothing the glass walls hadn't already revealed. The rest of the units remained behind the tape. I cautiously made my way up the steps. Ken remained where he was. Maybe he didn't want to hear the grisly details of what might have taken place inside. I wasn't different from him in that way, but I needed to know what was going on. An officer approached me as I hit the landing at the top of the steps. As we spoke, it felt like our words were dancing past each other. "Hi," I said. "Is there... We can't share any information at this time." "My wife works in that building. Can I..." "We've sent a team in, but unfortunately we can't." "Just tell me if it's a hostage situation." "Like I said, we can't say anything." A different officer came up beside him, on the younger side, bags under his eyes. "I don't think it's a hostage situation," she said, an eyebrow raised from the other cop. "I mean, I don't really know what it is exactly. I think that's probably the best we can say, right?" I paused for a second. "What?" She started, but then her expression shifted, as if she'd already said too much. She stopped herself, turned with her partner away from me, struggling with what to do next. I maneuvered back down the steps, reached Ken. "What did they say?" he asked. "They don't think it's a hostage situation. They're figuring it out. Sent some people." "Inside, yeah, I saw." "Yeah." Another look at the building. It was almost haunting me to enter. Then I headed back to my car. I could feel Ken wanting to ask me where I was going, but opting not to. I reached the shadowy corner of the lot again. I sat passenger side in my vehicle, readjusted the seats to incline as far back as possible. I had no idea what to do, or what was happening, but a watched pot never boils. And so I let the heaviness of my eyelids shut me out from the world. Ella wasn't too far away from me. She was right there, in that building. I just needed to distract myself. The cops would figure it out. It would all be okay. I drifted off. I woke up groggy, drooling. The lot was as dark as it was when I had first fallen asleep. I checked the time, 2 a.m. Solid hour and a half of an existential nap. I left the car, approached the building again, this time sure that the time-lapse would bring with it an insane amount of energy. Fanfare around the front of the building. I dreaded it. Yet I moved towards it. Footstep, footstep, footstep. Awaiting bad news, really. Footstep, footstep, footstep. I had a dream once that she died. Most of the details slipped my mind, but I remembered the feeling of that dream. It had felt like my life was completely over, like nothing mattered anymore. Footstep, footstep, footstep. Again my feet brought me to the edge of the steps, where a scene that was both more as well as less met me. The police presence looked much larger now, more cars than before at least, and yet a sort of empty feeling enveloped everything. I couldn't spot a single soul amidst the scaled-up operation. Besides Ken, of course. Slumped on the walkway leading to the steps, eyes half open, drifting in and out. "Where is everyone?" I shouted, shuffling. I saw someone emerge from the back of one of the squad cars, looking frazzled. It was the woman from before, the one who said she didn't think it was a hostage situation. "You should leave," she said. "Where'd they all go?" I asked again. She struggled. "They went inside." "And what did they say?" It took her a second to finish it, but she completed the sentence by saying, "They haven't answered." Just as all of the lights in the building turned on, Every floor, every room, illuminated. Before I could say anything, they all turned off. All I could do was stand still. Blink. What the... That happened an hour ago, too, she said nervously. Everyone who went inside, I said, trying to process. They just stopped responding? Yeah, the first team never responded when we tried radioing them. Next crew, same thing. Then another group, and now it's just me. As if telepathically able to discern, I was going to ask her the obvious question. We have more people coming, she tagged. They told me to stay back to keep continuity. My wife is in there. Do you know anything? I don't. No. But something in her body language said otherwise. Please, I said. A beat. They just sent me some footage. From inside? She pointed around a lot. No, from the exterior cameras in the moments leading up. Show me. She looked at me like I was crazy. Your whole crew is missing, I continued. If this isn't the time to mess with the rulebook, I don't know when is. A sharp inhale through her nostrils, then a half-centimeter, barely perceptible nod. She headed towards her car. As I followed her, Ken rushed up beside me, having awoken from his sidewalk nap. The officer looked back, eyes saying, Seriously? My wife's in there too, he said, likely having overheard the tail end of our conversation. She said nothing, just headed for her cruiser and unlocked the doors. Ken and I climbed into the back seat. From the front, she pulled the dash-mounted screen towards her, tapped a few keys, then angled it so we could see. The video showed security footage of the front entrance of the building, being fast-forwarded through. Hour after hour slipped by, the timestamp in the corner racing ahead as we only saw people entering the tower, never stepping out. We reached the point in the footage where the final squad went inside, and there it stopped. She then pressed a button and started rewinding the footage. The hours ticked backwards from present moment as we saw a replay of the last 2 days until roughly 48 hours ago. A new instance. Someone actually leaving the building. Specifically, a man dressed in business casual, with shoulder-length hair. The entranceway flickered behind him as he stepped out. Everything went dark for a brief moment before stabilizing. She paused the footage. 48 hours ago. The last time anyone left the building. Do you know who that is? I asked. We haven't identified them yet. Team's not sure if he even has anything to do with it, or if he was just the last person lucky enough to leave. I squinted, tried to place the pixelated face. Then, a new thought. I unlocked the door, got out of the car. Where are you? They both started. I'll be back. Don't go inside. I sped my way home, reached the front door, key in the lock and turn. I spent an immodestly long time searching for binoculars, snapping open drawers and cupboards until I found them. I tossed them into a backpack. Next, tape, and a roll of string that I found in one of Ella's craft baskets. Having grabbed everything I needed, I then went back to my laptop. I looked up the details of the company Ella worked for, and maneuvered to their website. Buzzwords about cutting-edge research in cognitive modeling and perceptual imaging kept surfacing over and over, ushering in a new phase of technological evolution for the human race. I went to the section about the company's leadership team next. I was smacked in the face with an oversized image of the company's 2 founders. Both looked to be about in their mid-40s, well-dressed. Twins. I thought back to the face I saw leaving the building in the security footage. It was hard to tell if the memory matched what I was looking at, but at the very least, the hair looked the same. fighting off thoughts about whether these two freaks were a red herring, or if they were indeed trying to usher in Skynet or something. I decided to try Ella again. Maybe, just maybe, she was somewhere else. And I wouldn't have to think about this anymore. It could be the city's problem. I called her. That same old voicemail. I hung up. Certainly a night filled with fruitless phone calls. When I returned to the officer, Christine's cruiser, Ken was riding shotgun now. They both remained fixed on the building, attention permeating all around us. You said there were more officers coming, I asked. Yeah, she said. But they're just going to go inside, right? I don't know what the strategy is now. I looked at the time. 3:15 a.m. I have an idea, I said. It might be stupid, though. What is it? She asked. And it wasn't much longer after that the three of us were standing at the entrance of the building. In hand, my phone. I'd tied string around it, tight. Taped it for good measure, too. I pulled up the phone's camera and pressed record. Then, absolutely convinced this move would kill me, I opened the door to the building. No one seemed able to leave, and, harnessing every bit of hand-eye coordination available to me, made a very deliberate toss of my phone, trying to get it as far as possible while keeping it face up so it wouldn't flip. The move succeeded, the phone skidding past the receptionist desk and into the narrow hallway behind it. The door closed, the string slipping beneath the glass frame. We stood still. Minutes disappeared into the ether. Then, Ken reopened the door. I pulled the string, brought the cell phone back out of the abyss and up into my hand. I pressed stop on the recording button, and we all squeezed together as I brought up the video that had been generated. On the dusty black screen displayed, the ceiling of the lobby, and a distant sound. Thumping. Like something was happening in another room. And music. Is that Dancing Queen? Asked Christine. I brought my ear closer to the phone. The grainy sounds of a song were far into the background. Yet as I focused, there it was. The instantly recognizable ABBA tune. Ding. The sound of a nearby elevator arriving in the video. The doors opening. The doors closing. Then a slow scraping. Crawling. Labored breathing. Pained breathing. A voice that sounded like it had never known air. I'm so sorry. The video lingered on its stationary shot of the ceiling before being dragged back to the outside world, ending on my disheveled reflection poking the screen. I sat with the unplaceable feeling stirring within me. Then I looked around, spotted a big rock near the bottom of the steps. I shifted down, grabbed it, ran back up. What are you doing? Ken. I'm gonna break a window. Whatever is happening, we're gonna get some attention. Do you think that's gonna do anything helpful for us? Said Christine. We can't just do nothing, I said. Lights flickered from one of the higher floors all of a sudden. We turned our heads up in unison to catch a bloodied hand reaching up to the window in one of the freshly illuminated rooms. So high up. The hand brought with it a piece of paper, which it pressed flat against the window. Binoculars. I pulled them out of my bag, focused on the sight. The piece of paper featured the following message in chaotic scrolls. Don't try to save us. It looked like a kindergartner wrote it, each subsequent word featuring more messier penmanship than the last, as if executive function waned with each letter. The hand kept slamming the message, the paper, against the window. What's it say? Ken asked. I handed him the binoculars. He looked up, froze. That's May's hand. The words came out of him immediately. Too quickly. "What?" asked Christine and I in unison. He handed me the binoculars, desperation marking his voice. "I think that's May's hand." "You think?" "Yeah," he said. "I mean, maybe." "Wait, Ken, hold on. I think I saw a blue bracelet," he said, looking unreachable. I fixed the binoculars against my eyes again and looked up, but the hand was gone, only streaks of blood remaining. Was there a bracelet? I don't remember. "I think I saw it," he continued, listless. "It was just like hers, and if she's in danger, I have to go." He beelined to the door. Christine rushed after him. "Take out your phone," I shouted. "What?" he asked. "If you're gonna be a hero..." "Matt, what are you doing?" asked Christine. "If you're gonna be a hero," I continued, "answer my call and narrate everything, and we'll come find you." I waited for his expression to shift, for reality to sink in and for his bravery to disappear. But he didn't waver. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "Call me," I said. And he did. A split second of my phone ringing brought back the fantasy of maybe, just maybe, it being Ella calling, before I snapped back to reality and answered the call. "All right," I said into the phone, dodging Christine's incredulous glare. "Describe everything you see, and don't stop talking." He nodded, phone pressed against his ear. He entered the building. I stayed on the line, Christine beside me, bated breath. "The lobby's dark," he said. "Explain everything. Don't hold any details back." I caught him through the glass walls, taking slow, deliberate steps, inching forward to the end of the lobby. "You killed him," Christine whispered. "Don't say that," I whispered back. Then to him, "Tell me what you see, Ken." "It's still the lobby. It's still dark. I'm going into the hallway. I see something by the elevator. They're on the ground. They don't look well. I see..." And then he froze. "See..." The grainy, distant music in the background again. A new track now. "What?" "See..." he repeated. "See?" I asked. "See... see..." "Ken?" Christine yelled over the phone. "See..." "Snap out of it, man," I said. "See..." "Ken?" "Say something," Christine said again. "Ken." 23. I was at a loss for words. 23, he repeated. "What does that mean, Ken? You were just with us." 23. I heard the phone hit the ground with a clatter. The sound of footsteps. Silence besides the grainy background music until the ding of an elevator arriving. Christine grabbed my phone, angrily hung up the call. "So," she said, "did you get what you needed from that?" "He was gonna go in there no matter what," I said. "We need to figure out what happened." "We don't need to do anything. This is National Guard territory." "We can't wait anymore. It's already been too long. My wife's in there." "Yes, so was his." My mind raced with horrific thoughts. I tried to block out the noise. There had to be a way forward. "Obviously," she continued, "something took over him in there." A new, desperate theory crossed my mind. I had to run with it. "Sound," I said. "What?" "That's what's overtaking everyone. There's something I don't know. Maybe coded into the songs or something. Something subliminal." "You're gonna stake your life on that?" Hell is my life. The irony wasn't lost on me that my rush back to Christine's cruiser, yanking at the locked door, mirrored the same desperate push Ken just made. In a morbid way, his restlessness made me think I'd been moving too slowly. She sighed as I kept pulling on it. Help? I asked. What are you? Hearing protection. Do you have anything at all that can block out noise? For the final time, we stood in front of the building with a half-baked plan. I'm not positive, I told her. Both of us had hearing protection earmuffs, like the ones you'd use at a range, half on. But if I wait and she dies, I continued, I won't be able to live with myself. I secured the earmuffs over my other ear and walked towards the entrance. I'd told Christine she didn't have to come with me, that she could wait for backup and work out a new plan with whoever showed up next. But in the reflection of the glass, I saw her pull her own hearing protection into place and fall in close behind. We stepped inside the building. Lobby furniture shrouded in darkness. I sensed a faint, electronic light casting the lightest of shadows over the walls. I couldn't hear my own footsteps as I maneuvered around the reception desk. I lifted my head, caught an expensive chandelier and fixtures hanging from the high ceiling. Despite attempts at controlled breathing, my heart pounded with the intensity of an intruder at the door. I peeked into the narrow hallway, and immediately my gaze dropped to the sight of a sickly, dying thing. Flesh loose, hanging over bones and organs like cloth draped over a mannequin. I knew it was human, or at least used to be. My eyes lifted to a large TV screen fixed against the nearby wall. It had what looked to be a stock image on it, a photo of a little girl facing the camera, smiling while holding a flower out in front of her, a surreal, too comforting grass field in the background. At the bottom of the screen, in a murky, blood-dark color, it read 23. I looked behind me. Went to mouth something to Christine, but the second I spotted her eyes, she had a faraway stare, locked onto the image. I saw her mouth 23. She repeated it. Christine? I said. I shook her shoulders, but nothing registered for her. I briefly, instinctively turned back to the photo, almost as if I wanted to brick my own brain just to get it, but then quickly turned away again. Christine headed to the elevator, clinical in her movement. Press the call button. Ding. The doors opened onto the sterile interior. I rushed behind her and stepped inside. She had already pressed the button for the 23rd floor. Between the closing doors, I noticed that the person-esque thing lying on the ground in front of us had a blue bracelet around what remained of its hand. I'm so sorry, Ken. I heard the voice rasp and wondered if, before Ken lost himself, he had recognized who he saw in the hallway. The elevator car moved up swiftly. I took my earmuffs off and dropped them to the floor. My sound theory was moot. I looked over. Christine stared ahead with a lobotomized look, while sterile corporate music played in the background. Completely gone. We approached closer and closer to floor 23. A horrific mosaic of sounds started creeping in, and as I wondered why I hadn't been overtaken, compromised the way everyone else had been, I resolved that it was best I follow Christine's actions from here on out. Act like her. It was a decision I made only a split second before. Ding. We arrived. The doors opened to a wall with a large screen mounted on it. On screen, the same stock footage. Girl with the flower, a new word at the bottom in a blood-dark hue. Left. Christine immediately turned left into the corridor. I did the same, trying to stay in lockstep with her. Same rhythm, same cadence, Same lifeless, mechanical movement. We hit the end of the hall, where another display was mounted to the wall. The girl with the flower on screen again, and at the bottom of the screen, right. Christine with a sharp right turn. I followed again, convinced I was stupidly walking right into death. I'm coming, Ella. I didn't expect the music cue. The bright synth riff of Queen's I Want to Break Free starting up. As we paced the long corridor, drum machine, bass, and guitar joined. Then, I Want to Break Free, sang Freddie Mercury. The power walk continued as I voiced out the side of my mouth. Christine, are you in there? To no response. We hit another wall with another TV bolted on. That same stock photo and the word beneath. Left. Another turn into a long hallway. I followed my dance partner. I want to break free from your lies. You're so self-satisfied. I don't need you. I spotted blood on the floor, and a body up ahead. A body. Crawling. The thing, person, whatever looked inhuman, trying to keep pace with Christine's brisk stride. I barely had time to clock its warped features and broken appendages. God knows I want to break free. End of the hallway, another screen. Flower girl, left. We followed the direction. I felt like we were reaching the end, but I have to be sure when I walk out the door. Screens line both walls on the hallway now, flanking us. The image of the girl with the flower repeating again and again. New words pulsed at the bottom of the screens, catching in my peripheral vision. Continue, don't stop. Get ready to shed, let it all go. And ahead of us, the open doors to a massive hall. I steeled myself. We entered the gigantic room, and I caught a scene that didn't fit words. Rows and rows of people. At least some look like people. Others, completely unrecognizable. Most on the floor, dead, life squeezed out of them, like they'd aged hundreds of years. Faces hollowed out, eyelids liquid. Some trembling, shuddering, on all fours, ligaments torn, new appendages growing, changing shape. In the darkness of the room amidst the electronic glare of a large screen, I would have described most of the occupants as creatures, beyond alien, figures that didn't make sense. Catching Christine starting to shiver, I matched her movements, those near the back of the hall, including Ken, who I spotted nearby, were shaking, sweating, slowly losing their hair, developing strange lesions, but still human. I was sure that near everyone who must have worked in this building was squeezed into this large hall. The music continued, the instrumental break ending, as the vocals kicked back in. I forced myself to lift my eyes to the giant projected image of the flower girl covering the far wall, splayed like we were all moviegoers in a theater. I read the word at the bottom. Evolve. Freddie sang, but life still goes on. I can't get used to living without you by my side. Ella. What have they done to you? I spotted a man walking the rows, longish hair, surprisingly nice clothes on for such a brutal affair. Pair of dark sunglasses on, too. The only one not looking at the screen. Like me, he seemed unaffected. God knows, got to make it on my own. He made his way closer. Under his breath, he kept repeating the same words. Evolve. Examining with the carelessness of a yoga instructor. So baby, can't you see? I've got to break free. As he came within reach, I recognized him. The photo from the website of the company Ella worked for. One of the two twin founders. He shifted past the shivering Ken. Evolve. The dissociating Christine. Evolve. And as his eyes met mine, evolve. I broke away from my act and forced him to the ground with everything I had. His skull cracked against the floor. My hands cinched around his throat. Yet as I tried to force the life out of him, he just looked curious. How are you not affected? Tell me how I stop this, I said, a smile as if that was never going to happen. The image, he continued. How is it not working? I realized the answer as I spoke the words. Colorblind, red-green deficiency. We're working on a version for that too. I tightened my grip. Pain was the only tool I had at my disposal. Tell me where Ella is. So you're the husband. Where? I'm so proud of her. She's proof. Our theorem had merit. You killed her? Far from it. She's the reason me and my brothers' names will live on forever. I crushed the air from the freak's lungs. He writhed, but I kept my hands locked in place long after his resistance faded. The song ended, and then a new tune began, ABBA's Dancing Queen. It played as I weaved through rows and rows of horror, reaching the projector casting the image. I knocked it to the floor, smashed at it, kicking, tearing, feral, doing everything I could to upturn the sinister broadcast. Finally, the image was gone from the wall. I looked behind to see a sea of chimeric death, still cloaked in darkness. There were only a dozen or so people near the back of the hole who looked alive at this point. I rushed back to them, to Christine in particular. What the? I heard her say. I snatched the sunglasses off the corpse of the founder. It's an image, I said. An image that overrides your mind, gives you a command. She was still coming back to reality, not totally registering what I was saying. Put them on, I said, handing her the shades. Then leave the building. How did you... Go. She took deep breaths to ground herself, like whatever state she'd returned from was hellish beyond words. The rest of you, I said, addressing Ken and the others. Blindfold yourselves as you leave. Use your shirts or whatever you have on you. Christine, I pointed to her, will lead the way. The few survivors, still confused, shifted their eyes towards the cosmic mess of human destruction around them. Don't linger, I repeated. Leave, eyes closed, or blindfolds. Christine leads. She put on the dark frames, looked at me. What are you gonna do? Don't worry about me. I shifted away from the group, toward the end of the hall. I glanced back over my shoulder to see, amid crying, panic, and breakdowns, the few survivors pulling themselves together, covering their eyes with their hands or lifting jackets to obscure their sight, while Christine led them out. I prayed Ken wouldn't linger near the first floor hallway. When he got there, prayed he wouldn't see the horror of what became of May. I continued on. My eyes shot from bleeding out creature to bleeding out creature. Chimeras, monstrosities, the rare human-like corpse among the aberrations. I sat in the middle of the destruction and called her cell one last time. Straight to voicemail. Tears fell. I wasn't totally there. It felt like my body was grieving before my brain could make sense of it. A loud scream came from outside all of a sudden. I rushed to one of the windows, peeked out, saw a nearby billboard with a new image overtaking it, the stock photo with the girl. I looked past it, billboard after billboard, screen after screen, all overtaken by the flower girl image. The word at the bottom on every display: evolve. I thought back to the security footage in Christine's cruiser, the man who left the building. I had to wonder if he was the brother, the other founder, and if he'd just now done his half of the psychopathic job. Not that it mattered. It was clear whatever they'd attempted in the building didn't work. More importantly, Ella was gone. There was no life for me anymore. Then I heard a voice in my head. Matt. I shot up. It was vivid. Too vivid. Matt, it's all right. I'm right here. It sounded like Ella. Where are you? Is this real? It's okay, hun. You can change now. I headed toward the entrance at the back of the hall, trying to find the source. I can't change, I said. I can't. It doesn't even work on... Not that I'd want it to. Cold. Cold? I started backtracking. Warm. I looked all around me. Tell me this is a bad dream, Ella. I knew you'd come. I kept shining lights for you. I shifted deeper into the hall again. Warmer. I felt disoriented. I wasn't seeing straight anymore. Even warmer. Lights, Ella. Every time they all turned on, that was me. Now evolve so we can stay together. My breath quickened. A new type of horror hit me. I spotted a door at the front of the hall, cast in shadow. It creaked just a hair open, with something peeking out. Ella? All of the lights snapped on, as if commanded to by an invisible force. Through the horror of the all too clear room now, I locked eyes with the nightmare peeking out at me. Ella? I asked. Found me. When I was younger, I wanted my sister to go away. I didn't want her to die necessarily. I didn't want anyone to physically hurt her. But I wanted her to go away. Not even permanently, just for a while. Just enough time for my parents to shine their gaze on me. Just for once. Just for a little while. But that didn't happen. Claire had everything. She was beautiful, popular, smart. She was in every extracurricular. She received fantastic marks. The principal knew her by name in a good way. She came out of the womb as the golden girl of the family. The worst part? She was nice to everyone, especially me. She went out of her way to befriend me, make a sister connection. When she was 5, she drew pictures of us together. When she was 10, she read my favorite YA series so we could talk about it. She tried everything. But I couldn't help but loathe her. Being outshined by your baby sister is hard enough. Feeling guilty about the hate you have towards her is even worse. Everything changed when Claire entered her senior year of high school. She was 18 and having her dream high school experience. I was in my second year of college by this point, and still living at home. I was just about to lock myself in my room for the night with my hot date of reality TV when I heard it. Oh, stop it. You're bad. It was Claire's whispered voice, between giggles, coming from her bedroom. I paused and stepped closer. Who was she talking to? Tonight? It's late. Baby, there's zero way I could get out of the house without someone seeing. Well, perfect little princess is going to sneak out to see a boy. I was practically foaming at the mouth to rat her out to our parents, just to see them disappointed in her for once. I know, I want to see you too. I know it isn't the same over the phone. Yes, I know you've been patient. Okay, I know. Yes. This weekend my parents have a thing. Can I finally meet you then? I take a step closer to hear the specifics, which makes the floor softly creak. I hold my breath. Hey, I've gotta go. I'll text you, okay? Okay, bye. I hear her shift quickly and her footsteps coming to her door. My panic surges and I try to get as far away from her room as possible in a matter of seconds. Just then her door swings open. Oh, Sissy, it's you. She smiles, out of breath from coming to the door. Just going to my room, I say cautiously. Normally I would bite her head off for using the nickname she has always called me, but I let it go. I've always hated it, though I don't understand exactly why. She smiles at me in relief, and I decide to make sure I wasn't imagining the earlier conversation I overheard. Claire, I wanted to invite you to a concert I'm going to on Saturday. Do you want to go? Mom and Dad have their party, so we can grab a bite and go. I offer. Her face falls. Claire is always trying to tag along with me to things. Oh, that sounds so fun. I would love to, really, but I told Mary Beth I would sleep over at her house on Saturday, and her mom is doing a big dinner thing, so I told her I would go. She lies, trailing off while toying with her ring on her middle finger. Oh, that's too bad. Maybe next time, I tell her. She must really want to go meet whoever this is. Normally, she would never turn this down. I turn and walk towards my room. My hand is on the door when Claire's voice sounds again. You know what? I'll cancel with Mary Beth. She'll understand, and we can have sister time. She offers. Crap. Oh, it's okay, I quickly say. We can always do something another time. Enjoy your time with Mary Beth. Her smile falters a bit. You mean it? We will do something another time? Because I would really like that, Sissy, Claire says softly, and her honest expression almost makes me falter. Almost. Of course, Claire, we have all the time in the world, I say, opening my door casually. She smiles brightly, nods, and disappears downstairs. I'm not a bad person, I promise. I just want Claire to understand how I've felt my whole life being the family disappointment. I don't even hate Claire. I just want her to suffer. Just a little bit. Saturday came in a flash. That morning I saw Claire redoing her hair over and over, trying to get her auburn hair to lay just right. That afternoon, I saw her laying out at least a dozen outfits on her bed, carefully analyzing each one. I watch her from her open door for a minute while she furrows her brows at each option. You're sure putting a lot of effort into looking nice for Mary Beth, I say, causing her to jump in surprise. Oh, she laughs softly. I think she wants to take photos, so I just want to make sure I look nice for them. I'm probably overthinking it. I nod and step into her room, peering down at the unlimited options. The green dress, with your denim jacket, makes your hair look really vibrant, I offer, surprising myself. Her eyes widen a bit as she takes in the small compliment. Really? You think so? She asks me. I nod. Green is your color for sure, I add. She smiles brightly. Thank you. It's actually my favorite color, too. You can't go wrong with a sister pick, she says excitedly, holding up the green dress on the hanger. The sudden sisterhood moment starts to make me feel overwhelmed. I force a smile and begin to walk out of the room before I remember. Oh, I'm leaving at 7 for my concert. When is Mary Beth picking you up? I ask. She seems confused for a half second, but corrects her face quickly. Oh, about 7:30. Don't worry, I'll lock up before I leave, she says casually, opening her jewelry box on her bed. Sounds good. Have fun tonight, I call over my shoulder as I head to my room. You too, Claire calls after me, even though she's only a few feet away. For some reason, she already seems so far away from me. The concert wasn't real. I had no plans for one, which was also why I insisted she go to her actual plans. My plan was easy. I would leave the house at 7 p.m., grab some food, then circle around for a while. Once Claire was gone, I would go to Mary Beth's house, claiming she forgot something at home. She wouldn't be there, and then I would call my parents in a fake panic, causing them to leave their party and come home to track Claire down. Claire gets caught with whatever boy she's with. Mom and Dad yell at her. She gets the "how could you disappoint us like this" face, and I revel in their anger. And tomorrow the dust will settle. Claire will bat her eyes and apologize, and everything will go back to normal. But for one night, she will get it, and that's all I need. At about 8:15 p.m., I go back to my house. I had to make sure Claire actually left. I open the door slowly and call into the house. "Hello? Claire, you still here?" Silence. I climb the stairs and look into her room. She isn't there, but her denim jacket is on the bed. She must have forgotten it. "Oh no, Claire, you forgot your jacket." I say out loud in an exaggerated voice, "I should be a good sister and return this to you at Mary Beth's house, which you are so totally at this evening." I take the jacket with me downstairs and immediately leave the house, jumping in my car. I'm almost giddy with excitement. I drive the 5 minutes to Mary Beth's house, humming along to my music. When I get there, I open my door and practically skip up the walkway and ring the bell. I then remind myself that I need to play concerned sister, and furrow my brows the way I saw Claire do it that morning. A beat later, Mary Beth's mother comes to the door. "Oh, hello, sweetie," she coos. "Hey there, just coming by to drop off Claire's jacket. She left it at home and it's cold outside," I say, holding the jacket up. Mary Beth's mother tilts her head at me. "Well, that is awfully kind of you, but Claire isn't here. I don't think so, at least. One moment." She turns back into the house and calls for her daughter. Mary Beth casually walks to the door. Her expression falls when she sees me. "Honey, is Claire here? Her sister came by to drop off her jacket." Her mother says, gesturing to me, "Oh, no, she isn't. But she will be. She is coming over later. Yeah, later." Mary Beth stammers. I widen my eyes and look directly at Mary Beth. "She isn't here? What do you mean?" "She told me she would be. Didn't you pick her up?" I ask her. Mary Beth's cheeks turn pink as she looks sideways to her mom. "Mary Beth, do you know where Claire is?" Her mother demands. Mary Beth quickly shakes her head. I shake my head and inhale deeply. "Okay, I think I'm going to call my parents," I say with a defeated expression. "Oh, honey, at least come inside to call them. It's cold outside. I'll make you some tea," Mary Beth's mom offers, standing aside to let me pass through. "Thank you," I tell her, pulling out my phone, which already has my mom's phone information pulled up, and I hit the green call button. About 30 minutes later, I see my parents' car pull into Mary Beth's driveway. I meet them at the door with that sad expression I've perfected over the last half hour. "What's happening? Where's Claire?" My mom practically shrieks as she walks up the pavement. I give a resounded sigh. "I have no clue, Mom. She said she would be here and I brought her jacket because I saw that she left it at home. But Mary Beth said she hasn't been here, and she doesn't know where she is," I say, looking down at the denim jacket in my hand for emphasis. My mom puts her hand on my shoulder and looks me in the eye. "It's a nice thing you did, bringing that to her. If you hadn't, we wouldn't have known she wasn't here," she says, squeezing my shoulder with her manicured hand. A small beam of pride wells up in my chest, but I only offer her a sad smile. My dad, who had been talking to Mary Beth's mom, walks over to us. "When was the last time you called her?" he asks, pulling out his phone. Crap. I didn't call once. Just a few minutes ago," I respond. My dad nods and pulls up Claire's contact info. I see him dial as he steps to the side of the living room with his ear to the phone. This just isn't like Claire. To disappear like that? My mom says. I feel my shining moment growing. It isn't. You're right. Do you think she lied? On purpose? Lied to you, Dad, and me? Maybe she lied to do something that you wouldn't have approved of. I say timidly. I have to make it sound like I'm coming up with a theory as I'm talking. Really sell it. As I'm watching the gears turn in my mom's head, Mary Beth and her mother appear in the room again. Mary Beth looks like she's about to throw up, and her mother has a stern hand on her shoulder. "Go ahead, tell them what you told me," her mother says sternly. Mary Beth is silent. I said, "Now, young lady, or so help me God." "Okay," Mary Beth squeaks. "I don't know where Claire is. That is true, but I know what she's doing." My mother raises her eyebrows at her. Oh, here we go. Mary Beth fiddles with the hem of her sweater, looking straight down at the hardwood floor. "Claire was meeting a boy tonight, and she asked me to cover for her." I feign shock on my face. "A boy?" my mom asks. "What boy? A boy from your school?" Mary Beth shakes her head. No, she met him online," Mary Beth whispers. The shock on my face is no longer fake. "What?" I yell. "Oh my God," my mom gasps, turning to find my dad. I'm sorry. She's been talking with him for a few months. I told her it was not a good idea to meet him alone, but she said he was normal and nice. She said that they video chatted a few times. I'm so sorry. I've been trying to call her since you got here, but she won't answer." Mary Beth begins to cry, putting her face in her hands. I hear my dad yelling in the other room. Claire, baby, where are you? Tell me where you are, Claire." I sprint into the other room and see my dad pressing the phone to his ear as hard as he can. His face is turned bright red. Tears have sprung from his eyes. I hear a sound coming from his phone, and I would know it anywhere. It's Claire, crying, wailing. "Daddy, please help me, please. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry." Her sentence is cut off by a piercing scream, loud enough to bring Mary Beth and her mom in from the other room. Claire, God!" My dad screams, hurling his phone at the wall, shattering the screen into a million pieces. My mom has her hand over her mouth, but her eyes are wild with emotions. "I'm calling the police," Mary Beth's mother says, as she scurries out of the room. My mom begins to sob, and my dad leans his head against the wall, trying to compose himself. No. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was just supposed to be grounded, I whisper. My father's head turns up to look at me. She was just supposed to be grounded, maybe yelled at, but that's all. And it would have been fine tomorrow, I whisper, looking down at Claire's jacket I still held in my now trembling hands. My mother and father make eye contact before my father slowly crosses the room to me. "What do you know?" It's been 2 weeks. 2 miserable, brutal, quiet weeks since Claire went missing. I've been waiting for that feeling of relief. That relief of getting what I always wanted, for her to go away. But it doesn't come. I take her jacket to sleep with me every night, holding it next to my pillow and curling around it. I've developed an attachment to it. Like I'm afraid that if I don't sleep next to it, the hope is gone, but as long as I have it nearby, I'm connected to her. My parents have stopped speaking to me since that night, after the police arrived at Mary Beth's house. They spoke to us all separately. I told them the truth, that I knew she was planning to sneak out, but I said nothing, hoping she would get in trouble. The officer gave me a sympathetic smile before closing his notepad. During this time, all they have gathered was that Claire did meet someone online who claimed to be 18 and named Ethan. Ethan was careful to not talk about plans or any specifics over text or message. They mostly spoke on the phone. They found phone calls and text messages going back months and months. They did find video calls, but they appeared to have been tampered with, as well as their chats. Whoever did this has done it before, and from the messages, they've gathered that Ethan knew everything about Claire already, seemingly before she even told him, and they finally figured out where he picked her up from, and it was less than a mile from our house. They found his phone at the park down the road from us, the opposite way from Mary Beth's house. The screen was broken, but it still turned on. My sister was the only saved number. Ethan figured out a way to cover his tracks, but the police keep saying they'll stay on it. Every time the phone rings or someone knocks on the door, my mom just about has a heart attack running to answer. She will say a few things in passing to me, but she's just so sad. She just stares at Claire's photo. Sometimes she cries, but she's mostly quiet. My dad, I know he blames me. I've tried to explain that I had no idea it was a boy online. I thought it was someone from her class. I would never want her to get hurt. He doesn't care, especially once the police pulled the records and he realized I never called her myself that night. What if you called her? Once you got to Mary Beth's, you could have spoken to her. What if you could have figured out where she was? He had asked me. To which I had no response. He leaves the house every day to look for her. We've led search teams, put her picture everywhere, held a press conference. Everything the police said would help. We even posted a reward. But the days pass and my sister doesn't come home. It was a Monday when we found out. When you find out something that impacts the rest of your life, you really zone in on everything around you in that moment. The wallpaper that had begun to lightly peel above the mantle that held Claire's soccer photo. The smell of the Febreze my mom had just sprayed in the living room when the detective called and asked if he could come by to talk. The sound of the garbage truck making its way down the road. If I close my eyes, I'm back sitting on the couch next to my mom. My dad refused to sit. He wanted to remain standing, no matter how much the detective insisted otherwise. That Monday was the day I found out that Claire was really gone. And she was really gone because they had found her. A hiker had discovered something wrapped in green fabric sticking out of the ground and called it in. It was Claire. From the autopsy, the detective had said they were able to gather that she had been tortured and brutalized up until the end of her life. Though it was hard to know specifics with what remained of her. Though I wouldn't be surprised if they were keeping details from us on purpose. To try to protect us. And they placed her time of death not soon after she had gone missing. And the boy? My father asked. The detective shook his head. We haven't been able to find him, sir. I still clutched her jacket while he continued to tell us the news as gently as he could, though I couldn't look at the detective. I just stared at Claire's photo on the mantle, in her green soccer uniform. Green. I always liked her in green. In my time, I've had to think about Claire. I've realized I actually liked quite a bit about her. I liked her laugh, her style, her unwavering kindness and optimism. And that was all I had of her now. These memories, these things I admired but could never bring myself to tell her. And now I never will. We held her funeral a week later. Closed casket. but there were enough flowers to rival a garden. We opened the floor for people to speak, and everyone spoke about how Claire had touched their lives in some way. It became too much. Too much to handle. I retreated to the parking lot to smoke a cigarette in an attempt to gather myself. I was standing outside for only a moment when I saw my mom approach from the corner of my eye. "Could I have one?" she asked. I raised my eyebrows but held the pack and a lighter out to her. She lit a cigarette and took a long drag before staring out into the lot. We sat there for a moment in uncomfortable silence. "She adored you, you know," my mom finally says. I turned to her in surprise. "No, I mean, she was always good to me, but I don't think..." I start. "She did, though. She idolized you. From the moment she understood anything, you were her big sister, and she just loved you. Her first real word was sissy. Did you know that?" My mom tells me, taking another drag of her cigarette. I stare at her in shock. "I didn't know that. No," I whisper. We sit in silence again before it's my turn to break it. We were supposed to have more time. We were supposed to become friends later. Be there for one another. The whole thing. And if I had just called her, or been less jealous, it's just not fair." "Death is never fair, honey," my mom interrupts, tossing the finished cigarette in the dirt and stepping on it with her boot. I feel my cheeks become wet. It must be rainfall. I reach my hand out to catch a drop and realize the sky is bright and blue. The wetness is coming from my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I wish I had done more," I whimper. My mom looks at me with a sympathetic expression, and she wraps me into a tight hug. I let myself cry into her shoulder. "You don't have to apologize to me, honey. Just take it one day at a time. That's all we can do," she says into my hair before patting me on the back and heading back inside. I sit down on the sidewalk, or collapse really, and just look up at the sky. I'm not very religious, but I would like to think Claire is looking down on all of us today, that she's here and laughing over the dramatics of the day, but admiring the beautiful flowers that bloomed just for her. If I close my eyes, I can hear her faint laugh carry through my memory, and I dread the day I will inevitably forget it. I scratch at my new tattoo on my wrist, remembering to put lotion on. So I welcome the distraction and pull the small tube out of my bag and roll up my sleeve, smiling at the word "sissy" in green ink, forever etched into my skin. My mother once told me that every plant has 3 names. The first a scientist comes up with, specific and precise, describing the plant without knowing it. The second is what locals call it, usually something practical like what it cures or what kills it. The oyster plant is named for how it tastes when cooked. The third name is what the plant names itself, and the one you have to listen for. She was in her garden the first time I heard this, hands deep in soil, entirely at home in a way she could never be indoors. The garden was her natural element. Inside the house she would move with the caution and formality of a guest who didn't want to impose, but outside she was different. She felt looser, more herself. An entire day could be spent out there, and I'd only see her come back inside when the light faded from the skyline, and all that was left were the stars shining on her work. Soil could be seen tracking across the kitchen floor without her noticing, all while lecturing me about humidity and hydration. Age crept up on her the same way she would always talk about her plants growing. Underground at first, with no one noticing. By the time we did notice, it had been growing for a while. At first, she would forget small things like appointments or where she'd put the keys. The larger things started to go. Faces, important dates, her own history, shuffled like a deck of cards in her mind. Some mornings she'd look at me with a polite, searching expression, working hard to connect the face in front of her to whatever memories she had. I'd watch her get close and then drift away just off the mark. Always somewhere near, but never my daughter. She always knew her plants, though. Every last one of them. All 3 names. I hadn't been back in 6 months. I told myself it was work, which was partly true. Distance played its part. Donna was also there, and more than capable. I had no shortage of reasons, though the real reason was simpler and less forgivable. Every time I came home, my mother was a little less there, and I was running out of will to face it. It took me every last bit I had to stand outside my old house that day. Donna met me at the front with the warmth and experience of a grief professional who's all too used to this. She walked me to the living room while explaining how things are going, her voice even and unhurried. A mix of bad days and good, she told me. Eleanor has been sleeping inconsistently, waking up at strange hours and eating only when reminded. Her mobility is fine, a blessing at her age, and she still spends most of her time outside, fall, rain, or shine. Her voice sounded defeated, which I knew meant she'd given up trying to talk her out of it. I nodded along to the health charts and test results, and then took a glance outside the kitchen window, which is when I noticed it. The garden should have been dying. It was mid-October and the beds should have been bare, mulched and resting, waiting for a cold, unapologetic winter. But what I saw was the opposite. Lush greens and hues of lavender spread through every section. Everything was growing, not stubbornly or forcefully, but with confidence. What you would see in the height of June. Colors that had no business being there were practically announcing themselves to the world, and blooms tumbled over the beds to stretch onto the pathway. The whole yard was luminous in the dull autumn, in a way I could never describe, and in the middle of it, my mother was happily tending to them. I realized Donna had asked me something. Sorry, what was that? I asked if you would like some tea, dear. Oh, yes, please, thank you. I found my mother in a far flower bed, kneeling in the soil without gloves, with the earth up to her wrists. She was tending something low to the ground, working around its base with a focus and precision that had been absent from the rest of her life for about a year now. Mom? I called out. She looked up. I watched her glance at me and try to piece together who I was. It took a few seconds, but she eventually settled and smiled. For a moment, she was entirely herself. So, Yeon, she finally said, using my full name the way she only did when I was in trouble or when she was feeling tender. Thankfully, today was tender. She eagerly beckoned me over. Come and look at this one. It's nearly ready. I crouched down to see what she was working on. It was an ordinary plant, dark leaves, compact, unremarkable. Ready for what? I asked. To do its part here, she said as if it were obvious. I stayed beside her for a while, not helping or talking, just admiring how hard she worked. The garden smelled as it always had, soil and earthy, with certain herbal tones underneath that I could never name. Through the long years, this unnameable smell turned into our home, more nostalgic than any laundry detergent or cooking. After a while, she sat back on her heels and glanced around with a look of satisfaction. There is still much left to do, she said, her voice bright with excitement. I know, I told her, helping her from the ground. I'm here now too. I can help. She patted my back and met my gaze with heavy eyes. You always did come back. 3 days later, I found myself wide awake at night. I laid in a spare bed, listening to the house around me settle into the dark and staring up at the ceiling. Once it hit 2 in the morning, I gave up and decided to head downstairs. Arriving at the kitchen, I stood at the window with a glass of water and looked outside. The garden shined silver and still in the moonlight. A slightly purple hue rose above the dark and revealed a path past the beds away from the house. I set my glass aside and unlocked the door. The air was cold and smelled of earth with notes of something sweet underneath. My bare feet brushed along the blades of grass, following the nearest path into the plants. I meant to walk to the fence and back, a short, aimless loop to try and get myself sleepy. I never reached the back fence. I walked far longer than I should have. That was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't alarming, just off. The way a nostalgic song sounds in a different key. It was a path I'd walked on several times before, yet it didn't feel the same. Then I noticed the beds on either side of me changing gradually. Rows were curving in ways that didn't match the rectangular yard I looked at through the window. Pathways branched where they hadn't before, running off at angles that shouldn't have fit the geometry of the space. When I tried to follow one with my eyes, I couldn't see the end. I stopped walking, and for a moment forgot how to breathe. Not from fear, but from what I saw around me. Flowers were wrong in the most beautiful way. Blooms that should have been closed for winter, closed for the hour, for the reasons of basic biology, were wide open and luminous. Lit from within were colors that I had no name for, shining as if they were teaching my eyes how to see again. The roots were moving. I could see them through the soil, which had become almost translucent in the moonlight. They were traveling, long and deliberate threads pushed through the dark terrain in every direction. They crossed, twisted, and recrossed beneath my feet as I felt their movement through my soles. With each new thread, a new pathway formed, lined with plants I never once thought I'd be able to see with my own eyes. Leaves whose edge moved like water, stems that hummed a familiar memory. All of it was forming and shaping around me. I pressed my hands against the soil. It was warm. Warm the way something loved for years is warm. From the inside out, beneath my palm, something moved, deep and slow, like a heartbeat moving when someone pressed against your chest, and in response my own heart matched it. I stayed on the ground for a long time, kneeling in my mother's garden, listening to the love it was given being shown back to me. I decided to stay after that week. I called my job and found a way to work remotely. Donna had agreed to let me help around with whatever I could. My mother accepted me back into her days without ceremony, as if I'd always been there, as if the months of absence were simply nothing. Some mornings she knew exactly who I was. We would sit over coffee and talk for hours, going nowhere in particular. Other mornings I was an acquaintance she was fairly certain she liked, but couldn't place quite why. She'd be polite to me during those days. The hardest mornings came when I was a stranger to her entirely. She would greet me with a look of complete confusion, like I was out of place. Those days I learned to just be useful, make the tea, hand her things, sit close without needing anything from her. Mostly I would be with her in the garden, always there for her, giving back whatever the morning took. During the night, I'd go out, every few days, always past midnight, always barefoot. I would follow a random path away from the house and watched what it would become that night. I didn't try to map it, nor understand it. I just let it take me along until it was ready to show me back to the house. During the mornings I would help my mother with the plants. It wasn't anything big during the last few weeks. Holding equipment, patting down soil, tasks that required more labor than skill. I never pushed past what she showed me, and she never asked me to do more than I could. Eventually we fell into a rhythm of me showing up and paying attention to how she worked, the same way she would pay attention to the garden. One morning in December, she was on her knees beside a sprawling vine that had taken over the south end, its leaves broad and dark, threading through with thin copper veins. I crouched beside her with a trowel I had just gotten the hang of. "This one is stubborn," she said. Not exactly to me, more to the vine itself. "It wants to go everywhere at once." "Is that bad?" I asked. "Not bad, just young." She worked her fingers through the tendrils that had been climbing the fence post. "It doesn't know yet that it has time. Young things never do." I watched her hands with a sureness to them, the edge of the leaves catching the thin winter light. My mother was like that, she told me. Always in a hurry, always certain the world would move on without her. The corner of her lips slightly lifted. She eventually slowed down. We all do. "What was she like?" I asked carefully. She rarely spoke of my grandmother since her passing. "Oh, stubborn as anything," she said, with a fondness that made my chest ache. "Beautiful, too. We both take after her in that way. You have her eyes, you know. Same shape, same color, same way they examine a person." I kept very still. My mother leaned back against the fence, smiling to herself as she relived small moments. "I wish you could have seen her in this garden. She was the one who started it, though she stopped tending it before long." I had seen her in this garden. She knew that, but not right now. I didn't try to correct her. I just stayed and let her look at me with an open, wondering expression. I wondered if she saw the same expression on me while I watched her work. "She taught me to listen," she eventually said, turning back to the vine. "That was the most important thing. Most would look at this plant and see it for what it is. She taught me to wait and see what it would become." She tucked a tendril into place with a gentleness that made her gesture look like kindness. I never thanked her for that. I meant to. "I think she knew," I said with confidence. My mother looked at me. For a moment, just a moment, she was entirely clear. No searching, no assembling of memories. Just her looking at me, smiling, the way she used to. "Yes, I think you're right." We worked in silence the rest of that morning. It was the best one we'd had in months. It was during January when I saw it. I had been seeing it for about a week. Always at the far end of the garden, always still, always there when I looked and gone when I kept looking. Each night I'd stood at the window and watched for a while before heading back to bed, as if something deep in my consciousness knew I wasn't ready to meet it. On a Tuesday I woke without an alarm, the same way I had been for weeks. I laid still in the dark, listening to the house around me. I could hear my mother breathing in the next room. I got up. The garden gleamed through the crisp night air the way it always had, silver, shining, and more than it should have been. I stood at the kitchen window for a long moment before I unlocked the door and stepped outside. My bare feet brushed against the grass. I started walking the way I always did, and there I saw the figure, waiting at the far end of the garden. This time I didn't stop walking. It was still at first, in a way that made everything around it seem restless by comparison. It stood the border where the garden pressed up against the fence, or where the fence should have been. They seemed entirely made of light. No shadow, no silhouette, just white. The shape was simply a person standing, tall and unremarkable. They took my breath completely. As I approached, they didn't move. Up close, it seemed no clearer than from far away, present the way a drop of temperature is, the way a room feels after someone has left it. I felt a weight on my chest, like my mind knew what was in front of me, but could not put it into words that I understood. They didn't even seem to know I was there, only the plants held their attention. "You aren't part of the garden," I told them. "You've been coming here for a while." "Yes." "Why?" The figure was quiet for long enough that I thought they wouldn't answer. After seconds that had the weight of hours, they finally replied. Because of how it's tended. Their voice sounded like a millennium of memories collapsed into a single tone. Most places I go are defined by what is being lost in it. This one is defined by what was given to it. At that moment, I understood who the figure was, and what they were here for. The garden around me felt imposing. My own heartbeat felt like a drum behind my ear. My mind, which should have been asking 1,000 questions, went blank. I couldn't stop myself from shaking. My mother, does she know about this place? I asked. Has she seen any of this? No. It gestured to all around us. She made this without knowing she was making it. What you see before you is love in its purest form. I stood with those words for a moment. For most of her life, my mother had come out here every day, pressing her hands into the soil, paying attention and asking for nothing back. Without knowing it, she built something that gave comfort to a presence most only ever meet once. She didn't do it for that. She didn't do it for anything but the plants themselves, and the simple, unglamorous love of showing up. That was the most her thing I had ever heard. I would have let out a laugh if tears hadn't taken over instead. Is it time? I asked. For her. She's very tired. She's been working for a long time. She doesn't know that either. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, I saw the garden, beautiful in every way. It isn't done yet. I want to help her finish it. You'd have to tend it the way she does. I know. Do you? I thought about every time I'd driven away, every phone call in place of a visit, every morning that I told myself that she was fine, that Donna was there and distance didn't matter. I thought of my mother the first day I came, her hands in the soil, asking nothing of it but to grow. I thought of her eyes when she told me I always came back. I'm learning, I finally said. Yes, I've been watching. I hope you tend to it well. Then they were simply gone. No drama, no gust of wind, just gone. Then it was just me, with the heartbeat of the garden beneath my feet. After that night, I kept working beside my mother every day that she was well enough. Some days she wasn't, though we went out anyway. On good days she told me things I'd never heard, about the country she left, about my father in the early years, stories of when she first came here. One afternoon in February we were tending to a dark-stemmed bed of roses, blooming a color words couldn't quite reach. I used to worry about leaving you, she said without looking up. When you were small, I'd lie awake thinking about it. You don't have to worry about that, I told her. I know, she said, patting the soil flat. I stopped. You came back. I know. I won't be going anywhere. Not anymore. My mother passed on a morning in early March, before spring had fully arrived. I woke up on a chair. I'd moved into her room 2 weeks before. The house had a stillness to it. The temperature had dropped. I sat beside her for a long time, until there was no water left in me to cry out. Outside the kitchen window, the garden was extraordinary. Everything open at once, every bed alive, glowing in the foggy weather in a way that didn't need to be explained. It was the most beautiful it had ever been. I went outside in my socks and knelt in the wet grass until the cold came through. The soil was warm beneath my hands. The low hum of a heartbeat was still there, steady and unhurried, as it had always been. I understood in that moment that it would always be there, that a life of love pressed into this ground didn't just go away, that she had just shown up every day, paid attention, and that was enough. It had always been enough. By summer, the garden had settled back toward the ordinary. The paths had straightened. The once impossible geometry softened. The plants settled to a beauty a neighbor could admire with just a glance. I kept the beds closest to the house and tended them, pressing my hands into the soil every morning the way she used to. Some nights I still walk to the far end of the yard. I don't see anything there now. But once, on a November morning with frost on the grass and my breath clouding in front of my face, I felt it. It felt like someone had been in the garden, a room just vacated, the air still warm from it. I stood in it for a while. It felt like company. I still don't know what I'm growing, but I tend to it the way she taught me, without asking for anything back. Some days I think I'm getting closer to understanding. Other days I think understanding was never the point. I think about my mother during those times. I wonder if she's reached wherever she was going, or if she's taking her time. At the very least, I hope her journey is lined with plenty of things worth stopping for and listening to. She used to say that every plant has 3 names. The third one being what the plant calls itself, what you need to be listening for. I spent a lot of my life not listening, too busy, far away, too certain that what was growing here was a garden and nothing more. I know better now. Sometimes I come out in the night, kneel in the soil and listen, the way she did, the way she was always doing during all the years I wasn't paying attention. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, I think I almost hear it. It sounds like Eleanor. When you were a kid, did you ever do something stupid or kind of mean to try and look cool in front of people you wanted to impress? Something you probably really regretted later on? I did. And now I really, really wish I hadn't. If I'd refused, then maybe. I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in a small town in the middle of the Midwest. It wasn't any place special. You've probably seen or driven through a couple hundred towns like it. It had a town hall, a church, a couple banks, a police station, a firehouse, a library, a doctor's office, a few dozen restaurants and shops, a movie theater, and a school. The school was the oldest building in town and probably one of the few things that could set my hometown apart from others. You see, there weren't separate buildings for an elementary school, middle, and high school. It was just one long building with different classrooms/areas meant for different students, other than occasionally getting refitted for modern safety standards. Like when they installed a new fire alarm system, no one saw a reason to change the building. This meant that the older and younger students tended to intermingle a lot. Most of the time, this wasn't a problem. A lot of kids, unless they saw a sibling or something, tended to stick to their age group. But sometimes, kids tried to step out of their comfort zone and hang with the upperclassmen. Most of the time, they got gently rejected, or laughed at. But once in a blue moon, the upperclassmen would allow an underclassman to join them. I was one of those lucky few, though if I'd known what I know now, I never would have tried. You see, I was homeschooled all through elementary school. My mother felt that public education wasn't good for a child's early development, and had my grandmother, a retired teacher herself, teach me. This went on until the summer I turned 11, when I begged my parents to let me attend public school. My dad agreed with me. He didn't think it was fair that I was being denied a chance to make friends. Finally, Mom relented and had me enrolled in the local school. Socializing had been hard at first, seeing as how I was the new kid. Some girls were nice, but most of them had been friends since kindergarten or earlier, and didn't trust an outsider. Thus, I had tried to reach out to the upperclassmen for friends. Unlike many other kids, I succeeded. My friends were both 2 grades ahead of me. Let's call them Rachel and Johnny. At 13, Rachel was 2 years older than me. I remembered I'd thought she was practically an adult because she wore makeup and had a cell phone. Her dad was the head of the most successful bank in town, making her family the most well-off. She was a little vain, but was usually nice. Her cousin Johnny was 14, having been held back a year for reasons I still don't know. He wore a leather jacket to school every day, regardless of weather, wore sunglasses whenever he walked outside, and flirted with every girl in his grade or higher. I don't actually know when or why they agreed to let me hang out with them. Maybe they took pity on me. But looking back, I wonder if it was because they thought I was enough of a pushover for them to make me play the mocking game. One of the benefits of going to such an old school is that there are numerous old spots and secrets that many of the newer teachers don't know about. Places and secrets passed down to each generation of students. Most of them are things like where the best places are to best make out without being interrupted, where in the school library you can hide if you want to cut class, etc. But there were some secrets remembered only by a few. One of them was the treehouse. Back in the 1950s, a group of students had built a massive treehouse in the forest behind the school. It wasn't a simple one-roomed shed in the branches, but instead a massive, 4-room structure with a waterproof roof, a permanent ladder, even a chimney. It had been a regular hangout for students back in the day, but only the upperclassmen. None of them were allowed to tell any underclassmen under threat of killing your social life. They were all seniors, so by the time the last of them graduated, knowledge of the treehouse faded away. At least until Rachel and Johnny found it, and came up with a new use for it. Well, a lot of people don't remember the treehouse. Rachel explained to me as we walked to the structure. It actually sits next to a well-used hiking trail in the park. Ghost park? I'd asked, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. Even I knew the rumors about the local park being haunted. Both my older friends laughed. By the end of today, Johnny promised as we approached the treehouse, "You'll know why it's called that." After showing me the treehouse, which had held up remarkably well for something built over 50 years ago, the two had led me inside. I was startled to find, of all things, a bird in a cage. It wasn't a very well-kept bird. While there was a dish of water and pile of seeds on the bottom of its cage, neither looked like they'd been touched in a while, and it was missing quite a few feathers, many of them on the cage floor. My dad has an aviary of starlings in our backyard, Rachel commented as Johnny picked up the cage. He doesn't actually count them. Whenever one dies, he just goes to the pet store one town over and buys a new one. He never even notices when I take one. I blinked, confused. Johnny, snickering, told the bird, "Mocking game." Then leaning out to the treehouse window, he tucked the bird's cage onto 2 especially thick tree branches. The foliage was so thick that you couldn't see the cage unless you were looking right at it, and even then it was a challenge. The bird flitted in its cage, agitated. Then it pulled one of its feathers out. "What are we doing exactly?" I finally asked. "Having some fun," Johnny grinned. It wasn't too long of a wait before someone walked up the trail. It was a woman dressed for jogging, a water bottle at her side. Rachel wiped off her lipstick, put her pinkies in her mouth, and gave a long, low whistle. The woman heard her and paused, looking confused. "Wait for it," Johnny whispered. Then from seemingly nowhere came a high-pitched voice. It sounded human mostly, but there was something off about it. It made a shiver slide up and down my spine. "So pretty, pretty, pretty." Startled, the woman took a step back, her head turning as she tried to see where the voice was coming from. "Pretty, pretty, come with me." The voice sounded a bit louder. Johnny and Rachel had their hands over their mouths, trying to stifle their giggles. The woman lost her composure and took off back the way she came. The jogging evidently paid off, because she was gone in seconds. Rachel and Johnny burst out laughing while I sat there stunned. "What just happened?" I asked. "Starlings are great at mimicking voices," Rachel chortled. "We used to just yell stuff into the woods in creepy voices. Then one day I thought I'd try using one of my dad's birds. We taught it what to say, hid it in the tree. It works great. The ghost park is called Ghost Park thanks to us." Johnny guffawed. For a moment, I wanted to leave. It was my new friend's primary form of entertainment was scaring innocent people. Then I doubted they were the kind of people I wanted as friends. But they were my only friends. I hadn't had any luck making friends with anyone else. In that age, feeling lonely sounded worse than feeling guilty. So I pulled up the corners of my mouth and faked a laugh. To keep from getting caught, Rachel, Johnny, and I didn't play the mocking game all the time. After all, do it too often and you're bound to get caught. Typically, we only went to the treehouse every 2 weeks or so, and during the winter, unless it was unusually warm, we didn't go at all. I never stopped feeling bad about scaring innocent people, but I thought that as long as we weren't actually hurting anyone, and didn't do it too often, then it wouldn't be too bad. Over the next 3 years, I kept hoping that Johnny and Rachel would eventually lose interest in the mocking game. Not just due to guilt, but because of how we played it. While the treehouse was meticulously built, something about it left me uneasy. As I spent more time there, I often wondered how it had stayed standing for so long, and in such good condition with no upkeep. Other things concerned me too. Why were there never bugs or animals in the house? Nor signs that they'd been there. How come rain never seemed to come into the windows? Or pine needles for that matter? How could such a big treehouse not be seen from a trail that wasn't more than 20 feet from it? And then there were the starlings. The birds Johnny and Rachel used for the mocking game all dropped dead after only being used 4 or 5 times. Often, Rachel would leave the bird in the treehouse on her way to school so we could play the mocking game after. I even went with her a couple times. The bird was always reasonably calm and happy when it was left there, but by the time we got back, it would be a ball of nerves, with several feathers ripped out. "Why do you call it the mocking game?" I whispered to Rachel and Johnny at lunch one day. They paused, shared a look, then shrugged in sync. "We were just hanging out in the treehouse one day, and we came up with the idea of scaring people," Johnny explained. "The name for it just sort of came to us." That topic, unfortunately, led to their discussing their weekend plans with me. That year, they were both graduating. Their respective parents both wanted them to go on summer college tours, which meant they'd be far too busy to do any of their usual summer antics. So, that evening, they wanted to go play the mocking game one last time. I was torn. On one hand, if it was the last night of the game, then I'd never have to scare people or go to the creepy treehouse again. On the other hand, we'd never played it at night. "But we don't have a bird," I whispered, hoping that I might talk them out of it. Rachel smirked. "We didn't always use a bird. We can just make spooky noises. The park's reputation will do the rest. Come on, it'll be fun." I sighed. I'd been a pushover throughout my childhood, and they knew by then that it didn't take much encouragement to get me in on their schemes. After class that day, I stopped off at home long enough to stuff a flashlight, bottle of water, and snacks into my backpack. As I started to head out the door, I remembered something my dad, a forest ranger for the nearby national park, had said about bears being more active at night. Not wanting to risk facing a dangerous animal, I grabbed a can of my dad's bear spray and a box of matches from the garage. My parents weren't going to be in until much later that night. In the last few years, Something weird had been happening in the nearby national park and at several neighboring farms. First, farmers had noticed chickens or ducks disappearing from their coops, then turkeys, then pigs, then sheep, then cows. Every couple weeks it seemed one or two animals would just vanish without a trace. When 3 weeks passed without any animals vanishing, the confused farmers hoped that was the end of it. That is, until hikers started disappearing. I made it to the meeting point on the school playground a little after 7. School had been closed for hours by then. Rachel and Johnny showed up a few minutes later, holding a bag of sandwiches. "Here," Rachel chirped as she handed one to me. "American cheese with mustard. Your favorite." I hate American cheese, and mustard makes my lips burn, but she thought it was my favorite, so I thanked her and took a bite of the sandwich. As we walked toward the treehouse, I spat out the bite I'd taken and tossed the sandwich into the trees. Rachel and Johnny didn't notice as they inhaled their sandwiches. By the time we got to the treehouse, the sun was gone. A few stars could be seen through the tree branches, but other than that, there was hardly any light. "Do you think anyone's even going to come through here?" I asked as the three of us turned on our flashlights. Johnny smirked. "I might have started a rumor that girls think the forest at night is romantic. We're bound at least to get a few kids from school." Later, I would learn why he was wrong. Several of the more popular kids at school were hosting a barbecue for the senior class, though all students were welcome to attend. Time ticked by as we waited for someone. I think I'm the one who noticed something first. You see, in nature, there's this phenomena called the silence. Whenever a dangerous predator is in the area, every nearby animal will go completely quiet. No birds chirping, no squirrels chittering, nothing. Hunters, loggers, rangers, anyone who works outside can tell you that it's an eerie feeling. My dad says it's nature's way of telling you to watch your back. That night, it was a warm spring, the kind that tells you summer is coming quickly. The night birds were starting to call, cicadas were going crazy. There was the scrabbling of small animals in the undergrowth. Then suddenly it all stopped. No forewarning, no tapering off. It just cut off, like turning off a radio. Rachel and Johnny had been talking to each other and didn't realize what had happened, but they seemed to notice rather quickly that their voices suddenly seemed a lot louder than they'd been seconds before. "What's going on?" Johnny whispered to me. I peered out the treehouse window, looking into the forest. I froze, my voice dying in my throat. There was something standing in the tree line, staring right at us. It looked like a stick figure drawing of a man, long stick-like limbs with no visible hands or feet, an impossible thin torso that stretched out at least 8 feet, and a round, lumpy head with 2 glowing red eyes. 2 eyes staring right at us. Johnny and Rachel still hadn't seen it, but they noticed I was shaking. "Hey, are you all right?" Rachel asked, her voice painfully loud in the silence. The creature's head ticked to the side. It hurt us. "It's probably just drafty or something," Johnny flippantly responded. I wanted to scream to shut them up, but my throat was closed. My eyes were still locked onto the creature. "Pretty." Johnny and Rachel froze at the sound of the voice. I did too, but for a different reason. I'd watched the creature's mouth open. "Guys," I whispered to Johnny and Rachel, "did you ever actually see the starlings say those things?" Johnny's pupils shrank as Rachel's face paled. "Pretty, pretty, pretty. Pretty teach talk." As I watched, I noticed the creature was getting closer to the treehouse. "Turn off the flashlights," Johnny hissed as he scrambled for his light. Rachel, tears and mascara running down her face, struggled but got her and my flashlight off. "Pretty teach talk, pretty teach lure food, pretty good teach." Its voice was growing closer. There was a creak in the boards of the ladder, and then it was silent. We waited. A minute passed. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Johnny, sounding like a scared little boy, was the first to speak. "Maybe it's gone." Rachel turned on her flashlight and screamed bloody murder. The creature was in the window, its entire head the size of the frame. It was even more terrifying up close. The skin was a rotten orange-brown. Its mouth was filled with knife-like teeth. Its eyes were soulless, pupilless red orbs. A white rag of some sort was stuck in the side of its mouth. "Pretty good teach. Pretty now food." Screaming, Johnny shoved Rachel aside and ran for the other window. Rachel, crying and screaming, tried to run after him. I was still on the floor, frozen, and she tripped over me. As the creature started to reach inside the house, Rachel got up, shoved me towards the monster, and darted after Johnny. I hadn't managed to regain my balance before something grabbed me around the middle, pinning my arms down. The monster's vine-like fingers dug into my skin. Trying not to cry or scream, I was forced to stare at the creature's face as it pulled me closer and closer to its gaping mouth. It sniffed. "Food giver. No eat food giver." It let me go immediately. I stood there in shock and noticed the rag sticking out of its mouth. It wasn't a rag, it was a wrapper. The wrapper from the sandwich I'd thrown away. "Must find pretty, pretty boy, pretty girl, must have pretty." With that, the monster's face removed itself from the window. I collapsed to the floor. I felt like laughing, crying, screaming, running away, and throwing up all at once. I debated leaving the treehouse, creepy as it was, but decided against it. As terrified as I was, I barely knew how to get back to the school from here during the day, let alone in the dark. With my dad's bear spray in my hands, I waited all night, barely daring to breathe. I didn't move, not even when I heard Rachel's agonizing screams, or Johnny's, which seemed to go on much longer than Rachel's had. Eventually, daylight started to creep through the woods, bringing warmth. That was a small comfort, though, compared to the sounds of morning birds calling. Birds wouldn't call if the creature was still there. The knowledge that I was truly safe helped me finally relax. Exhaustion started to take over, but I still managed to climb out of the treehouse. I was still wearing my backpack, but in my exhaustion, I forgot the matches and bear spray. It took a minute, but I made it back to the school. A police car was waiting there. My mother had noticed I wasn't home the night before and sounded the alarm. I was taken to the police station where I reunited with my parents. After giving us a few moments, a stern-looking deputy asked me to step aside and answer a few questions. Johnny and Rachel hadn't returned home either, and everyone knew I was one of their only friends. I told the truth. The realistic truth, anyway. Johnny and Rachel had been planning a prank in the woods, and I'd been roped into it. Some animal had appeared and scared them off, leaving me alone in the treehouse. When they decided I was telling the truth and did not know what had happened to Johnny and Rachel, I was free to leave with my parents. I noticed, however, that the deputies had looked troubled at my mentioning the old treehouse. The next night, my dad was called in to help with a fire in the woods behind the school. I was never told the exact details, and the newspapers were asked, bribed, or threatened not to publish anything. But the rumor mill couldn't be stopped. According to the neighborhood gossips, someone had found the old treehouse in the woods and either intentionally or accidentally set it ablaze. When they got it under control enough to go in, they found 2 sets of abandoned, blood-stained clothes. Johnny and Rachel's clothes, though the location of their bodies was still a mystery. The chief fireman said that a can of bear spray had been used to start the blaze, likely something left behind by a hiker. I don't know if that's truly what happened at the site of the fire. I may never know. What I do know, however, is that Johnny and Rachel's parents moved out of town that summer, Parents started insisting that their kids only go into the woods with an adult, and even some adults started avoiding the forest. For a year or so, it was all anyone could talk about. But as years passed, people forgot. The story of the two missing kids and the mysterious fire went from a rumor to an urban legend, then a campfire story. There are a few people my age in this town who've forgotten the whole thing. But I didn't. I can't. I work in the next town and have to drive by the forest every day to get to my office. And this morning, as I drove near the forest behind the school, I heard a voice call out, "Pretty?"
Tonight's video has 6 terrifying tales, from a story involving a park ranger who stumbles across something mysterious, to stories involving humanoids, creepers, and the paranormal. We will be covering a range of different topics. A huge thank you to the writers who allowed me to share these stories. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, likes and comments are always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Do you ever notice how many trees there are? I've heard it said there are more trees than stars in our galaxy. Amazing to think about, isn't it? That something as big as a star should be outnumbered by the trees on our planet. In our galaxy, at least. It's a lot of trees, and they're all very old, aren't they? So very old. Older than us. Maybe, somewhere out there, is a tree older than the dinosaurs, buried in a mountain, somehow having survived millions of years. I know we find fossils of trees, but what if those fossils weren't dead? It's interesting to think about, that there could be a tree out there older than all of mankind's history. Do you think trees have thoughts? After all, trees are alive, and every living thing has some kind of mind, and intelligence driving it. And if so, what do they think of us? I've got a fair idea of what they think about humankind. I'm a park ranger, and this is my story. It all began when we got a call none of us wanted to receive. A child had gone missing. This wasn't unusual. People go missing all the time in the parks. However, what made this one unusual was how it happened. Maxie Patton had been out with her mother on a picnic. At 13 years old, he was a wild and rambunctious child. And if there was one thing he loved doing more than any other, it was climbing trees. If only he'd been more of a video game kid than an outdoors kid, perhaps all this could have been avoided. You see, it was when he was climbing a tree that he disappeared. His mother recounted everything in detail. They picked out a nice clearing on the edge of the woods, near a large clump of trees Maxie could climb on as he pleased. We set up the blanket right here. Maxie wanted to climb that big pine tree. She pointed to it. I took my eyes off him for only a moment. She sobbed. Just 1 minute. And when I looked back, he was... Then she utterly broke down. The first thing we did was check out the tree in question. It was a pine tree, one of the tallest I'd ever seen. Clearly it was very old. How high up was he when he vanished? I asked his mother. A little skeptical, a kid could just disappear without a trace while climbing a tree. He was halfway up. Then she continued sobbing. After that, it was obvious we weren't going to get anything else out of her. Still, I walked around that tree twice, and I could clearly see the snapped branches and twigs where Maxie had climbed up. They ended at about halfway up. It was like he'd just stopped climbing then disappeared completely. We did a thorough search of the area first and found nothing. Well, almost nothing. See, about 50 yards from the pine tree I found a shoe, covered in pine needles and tree sap. It was red and blue, a Nike brand symbol on the side. It seemed to have been there for a long while, but when I bent down and picked it up, what I found inside planted the first seed of doubt, that this wasn't just a case of a woman losing track of her child. There, written in black permanent marker, was a name, Maxie Patton. So how did it get here? Maxie's mother was hysterical, and became even more so when I brought the shoe to her. That's it. That's my Maxie's shoe. She grabbed it, clutching it close to her chest as she wailed and wailed. We had to take her away. Taking the shoe from her was difficult, both physically and emotionally. That woman held the shoe to chest like it was a baby. I'll never forget how much that woman cried as she was taken away. Sad to say, but the shoe was the only evidence we had of Maxie and where he'd gone. She was escorted to the park center where she'd wait for the paramedics. We know that she wanted to help, but in her condition, she'd only be a hindrance. The moment she was out of sight, however, was when one of my partners spotted Maxie's blue shirt at the top of another pine tree, hanging from a branch by the collar, 100 yards in the opposite direction of where we'd found his shoe. He swore up and down that the shirt hadn't been there when we'd first looked, and did so with such conviction that none of us doubted him, even if we wanted to. We knew we had to get that shirt down somehow. It was evidence. But then again, how had the shirt gotten up there? Unlike the pine tree Maxie had disappeared from, this one had no sign of anyone having climbed on it. No broken twigs and branches slightly bent from where someone had climbed up and left the shirt. There were 5 of us when we went to first look for Maxie, excluding myself. We didn't think we'd need that many, because frankly, people go missing in the parks all the time. Often they'd turn up in about a few hours. But we'd never dealt with something like this. Staring up at that shirt, covered in pine needles. I think it began to dawn on all of us that we were dealing with something we weren't trained for. We radioed for backup while trying to figure out how to get the shirt down. I volunteered to climb up. The very first branch I grabbed, however, broke in half instantly, in the process scratching me across the hand. I cried out, looking at the gash across my palm. It wasn't deep, but the skin had been broken. Blood was already pooling in it. Groaning at the sharp pain, I clenched my hand into a fist, trying to stifle the bleeding. I glared, stunned, at the large branch which had just snapped when I touched it. My blood was already seeping down it and towards the ground, where it dropped onto the exposed roots of the pine tree below. Shit, I cried, turning back around to the others while clutching my wounded hand in my still healthy one. Park rangers always carry a first aid kit on hand, and they quickly helped me apply bandages to it, wrapping my hand in cotton. What happened? One of the other park rangers asked me, looking at the broken branch ludicrous. It just broke. I snapped back despite myself. My agitation at having been cut by the tree branch when it broke was severe. But then something else dawned on me. How had that tree branch cut me? It broke in the grip of my hand, and shouldn't have been able to move in such a way as to leave a mark this painful. Inadvertently, a shiver went down my spine. I became acutely aware of how many trees were around us. Was I mistaken, or had their number increased since I'd last checked? I had to be mistaken. We need to split up and find Maxie, another park ranger said. I was thankful, given it meant I didn't have to focus on the trees anymore. What about the shirt? Another said, indicating the garment at the top of the tree. We'll come back for it later. The first one said dismissively, You know, it's strange. For the life of me, I cannot remember their names. See, I was still new at that time. A rookie, really. I barely even knew what I was doing. I never saw any of the other park rangers involved in the search for Maxie Patton again. Most of them retired or transferred to a different park. But sometimes, I do wonder if we all came back from that search. We split up into 3 pairs, moving in a perimeter from Maxie's last known location, the pine tree. I was paired up with a man whose name escapes me. I just know he was Hispanic, and that's all I can ever remember about him. We were sent north, in case Maxie, or whatever was left of him, had somehow gotten there. The others went east and west. If we found anything, we had to radio it in and then come back. If we found a body, we had to leave it undisturbed. That was obvious, of course, but I really hoped we wouldn't find anything, because what we'd found so far just didn't sit right with me. How did his shoe get 50 yards from his last known location? As I thought back to the moments when I had found that shoe, I began playing it over and over in my head. Something was nagging me about it. Hey pal, said my partner. What? I replied. You ever climbed trees as a kid? I nodded. My face was beaming as I thought back to those happy days. When my partner grimaced, however, I blinked confused. What's wrong? Shaking his head, my partner muttered something in Spanish under his breath before he answered. I did too. A few times, but he stopped walking and turned to face me. One time when I was climbing a tree, something happened. What? I asked, curious if this had anything to do with our current search. It was back in Mexico, before my family immigrated to the States. There was a tree in my abuelo's backyard. I climbed it every time I went over. One day, when I climbed to the very top, I was looking out over the entire land around my abuelo's house. Felt like I was king of the world. Then I saw it. Saw what? My partner didn't answer. He opened his mouth, paused, then slowly closed it, shaking his head. He wouldn't believe me. He sighed then, opened his mouth to say something. When his eyes widened so large he looked like a fish. He was looking at something behind me. Furrowing my brow, I began to turn around when he grabbed my arm in a vice-like grip. Don't. He hissed through clenched teeth. Don't look. I couldn't help myself. I wished I had taken his advice, when my eyes found the blue shirt of a young boy hanging from the bottom branches of a tree with a broken branch. Probably about 100 meters away, blood was dripping from it onto the roots below. My heart began beating in my chest so fast I thought it would burst. That's impossible, I muttered, then blinked. What I saw the moment my eyes opened will forever haunt me. The tree had come closer. My partner began cursing, letting go of my arm and stumbling back. He crossed himself, saying silent prayers. We have to go, he said with a shaking breath. Now. I didn't argue. Instead, I began running. My partner right next to me the whole time. I didn't dare look back once, and neither did he. All thought of finding Maxie was gone. For all intents and purposes, he might as well not exist. At that moment, all that mattered was getting away from that tree. Exhaustion caught up with us eventually, though, and we stopped, panting as we tried to catch our breath. Did that just happen? I said through my painful gasps of air. Did that actually just happen? I don't know, amigo, said my partner. Did you see it move? I asked him. No, he answered, but I saw the others moving. What? Their branches and leaves were moving, he answered. You heard that, right? I nodded. By this point, I was thoroughly done with everything. For lack of a better term, this was just too crazy. I was watching them for a while. He continued, wondering why they were moving with no wind about. Then, what? I asked him. He looked me grimly in the eyes. I saw a boy, he said. The branches moved aside, only briefly, but I saw the body of a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 13, but, amigo, we mustn't find that body. I didn't want to ask, but curiosity got the better of me. Why? Because that thing could never be called human, not after they're finished with it. What do you mean, finished with it? My partner didn't answer. Instead, he began praying again in a shaking voice, crossing himself over and over. What was happening to Maxie's body? I pressed, not consciously. He didn't answer me at first. Instead, he licked his lips, looking around us, eyes darting from one spot to another. When he spoke, his voice was low and shaking, the same thing I saw in my abuelo's backyard when I was a child. I didn't say anything to that. I just sat on a stone, leaning backward until my partner grabbed my shoulder. Don't, he whispered. There's a tree behind you. I didn't need to look to know he was right. It was obvious anyway. We hadn't left the forest after all. What do we do? I asked him. I kept my eyes on his face intently, because looking anywhere else meant seeing a tree. Ignore them, he said firmly. They might leave us alone if we do. So we did. We just sat on the ground facing each other, catching our breath. I could hear the singing of birds, the gentle flow of a stream nearby, but the only thing I could pay attention to was the sounds the trees made. The soft creaking of wood, the swaying of leaves and branches on this windless day, the trees brushing against each other. Neither of us said anything, just looked at the ground to avoid the awkwardness of staring at each other's faces for who knows how long. The silence between us was marked by our tense patience. Something was going to happen. We could feel it. Even after running from that thing for God knows how long. I didn't believe we'd escaped it. It was still out there, waiting, just like us. I've heard stories about how some hunters track their prey. They shot it first, critically wounding it, then follow the blood trail it leaves behind, waiting for it to collapse from exhaustion. Why bother letting it put up a struggle when you can wait it out? I remember those stories when I looked at my hand. The cotton around my palm was soaked a crimson red. Why is this happening? I asked my companion. He said nothing, just stared at the ground. I've never heard of this before, I continued, my voice dull and tired. I've heard stories of Bigfoot, Mothman, even freaking dogmen in Michigan. Some people say they've seen aliens, others, goblins and fairies. And they always say they see them in the woods, peeking around a corner, watching them, hiding behind something, like a rock or I couldn't say it, because they were still all around us, listening. But I've never heard of anyone being hunted by a tree. When I said that, I don't know why I did. I guess accepting the reality of what was happening would make it easier. It didn't. Because when my partner looked up at me suddenly, I could see it in his eyes. He was disappointed in me. I was talking in the presence of other trees. I didn't care. This was just too weird. Any rational part of my brain was long since dead, unable to deal with how bizarre this was. I wondered if my partner was going through the same thing. Then again, he claimed to have experienced this thing before. Are we sure they're trees? He said slowly, like he was talking to a child. What? I answered, and eyes narrowed. My father once told me a story. It was about a demon possessing a woman he knew as a child. He said she went raving mad, biting people and scratching her face. When he finished, I couldn't help but wonder if demons only possessed people. Are you saying a demon has possessed a tree and is hunting us? Maybe, he answered. Who knows? I mean, how do we even know if that thing was a tree? Looked like one to me, I replied, trying not to peek over my shoulder to see if it was behind me. But trees don't move that fast, and they don't carry around pieces of clothing. They don't chase people. You said you saw them with a boy's body, I pointed out. My partner swallowed, crossing himself. I did. I wish I hadn't, but I did. And let me tell you, amigo, trees aren't capable of doing what was happening to that boy. I didn't say anything. The sun broke through the leaf canopy above us, and I squinted from the glare. So did my partner. Part of me thought he made a compelling case, but another felt like there was something we were missing. Missing. That was it. When a tree falls, I said, and no one is around, what sound does it make? My partner furrowed his brow, confused. How do we know trees don't chase people down? How do we know they can't move in the blink of an eye? Or take a young boy without anyone noticing and carry away his body? What are you saying? That trees are capable of doing that? Maybe they are, I replied. Maybe we aren't the first to have seen them either. You think there might be others? When you were a kid, you saw something in your grandfather's backyard, right? Something involving trees? Through the sun's glare, I could see his face going pale. Maybe you were one of the lucky few to live and tell the tale. What? He said, mouth hanging open. When a person goes missing in the savannah, some people believe they were killed by the local wildlife, and nobody doubts that. Africa is full of dangerous beasts. I let that sink in. Let my partner begin to understand what I was going to say before I finished. When a person goes missing in the forest, sometimes people assume they were killed by the local wildlife. Mountain lions, bears, wolves. But nobody ever stops and thinks about the trees all around us. Because nobody ever notices them. I pressed my lips together when I finished. My partner looked at me in disbelief and horror, dumbfounded. Do you have any proof? He said slowly. Same amount of proof as you do for demons possessing trees. Only a theory. Then my partner's face brightened with a dark realization. What if we're both wrong? I blinked. My mind began racing with possibilities. What if we were both wrong? What if this wasn't trees or demons, but something else entirely? If it was, then what was after us? I was about to say something when I noticed it. The shadow which had fallen between us, perfectly still on the ground, like a border keeping us apart, a long, thick black line, one with several appendages sticking outward from it. My heart skipped a beat as my eyes widened. I knew my partner saw it when he cursed, screaming and backing away. However, there was one part of the shadow which made my blood run cold. One of the appendages was broken, and from it hung the silhouette of a shirt. And slowly, very slowly, it was getting bigger. Unable to help myself, I began following the shadow's trail to its source, knowing full well what had made it. I could just see it in my peripheral vision, like a patient hunter waiting for its prey to roll over and die, when I heard the most comforting sound in my life, the distant hum of a car speeding down the road, passing us by. I turned back to my partner, locking eyes with him. At that moment, we both had the same idea. It was our chance of getting out of this nightmare. Neither of us knew if it would work, but we didn't have a choice, because the shadow had nearly doubled in size, and a tree was creaking, very loudly. We ran faster than I ever have in my life, before or since. We ignored everything around us, especially the silent, inescapable trees. We ran across their roots, pushed through their leaves, ducked under their branches, swerved to avoid running into their trunks. I didn't care if I touched them anymore. If I was fast enough, I could get away from them. Then they wouldn't catch me. But what about that infernal creaking? Always right on our heels. What would happen when it stopped? We couldn't be near it when that happened. Our very lives depended on it. So caught up in sprinting out of those godforsaken trees, I didn't think to look at my path. My foot hit something large and solid, and I cried out, losing my balance. My partner was in front of me, and looked over his shoulder, bewildered. He stopped and reached out his arms. I grabbed onto them and planted my foot back on the ground, pushing myself forward. Both of us kept running. We didn't need to check what I had tripped on. It was bound to happen at some point. We'd been running over them for ages. When we saw the gray asphalt of the road, my heart leaped for joy. The creaking behind us had become distant, growing fainter and fainter. I knew damn well we were safe the moment we reached that road, and then I felt something brush against my back, something I knew all too well. The hard, rigid texture of tree bark. The next thing I knew, I was laying on my back against the burning asphalt, panting as I caught my breath. My partner was bent over me, his face obscuring the sun. There were tears running down his face. "I saw it touch you," he said to me, weeping. "It was close, amigo, so close. I've never seen anyone run as fast as you did. We're safe now." He began murmuring, "We're safe. Praise the Lord, we're safe." I didn't say anything, just grunted as I pushed myself off the asphalt. I didn't remember even setting foot on it. My body ached and my lungs demanded oxygen, which I was only too eager to provide. I looked back at the woods we'd come out of. Marked by broken twigs and foliage, pressed into the ground, was the spot we'd both burst from onto the asphalt. Beyond it, I saw only trees, and not a single blue speck anywhere. I smiled, relieved, and stood up, glancing to the other side of the road, and my smile vanished when I saw the blue shirt laying on the edge of it. The inside of the collar was facing me, and on the white tag was a name written in black marker, Maxie Patton. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't tell my partner. He thought we were safe. Why should I take that away from him? Instead, both of us went back to the ranger station, tired, thirsty, and starving. The other pairs had already beaten us to the station. When we arrived, they'd been trying to work the radio, but stopped when they saw us come in. Nothing happened to them. They didn't find anything either. They didn't ask where we had been for the last 3 hours. They knew better than to do that. Nobody ever tried in the days that followed either. We didn't tell anyone about what happened. Some things are better left forgotten. A couple of weeks later, my partner resigned. Intense emotional trauma as his reason. I did the same thing 3 months later. I didn't keep in contact with him. He didn't try to. Instead, I moved to the city, surrounded by buildings and cars and the modern world. I avoid the parks, gardens, anywhere a single tree is. I stay away from it. I've always believed it was the only way to keep myself safe. I do enjoy going to a park my apartment overlooks. There are no trees there, only grass and bushes. That is, until I'm not sure what to do anymore. Because I had a dream last night. There was a pine tree in my apartment, and one of the lower branches is broken. I thought it was just a symptom of my trauma. Then I saw that tree in the park, and it's getting closer. When I was in my early 20s and in college, I moved out of my parents' house to live in a flat with roommates closer to campus. I remember being nervous but excited, because although I had little understanding of what living alone was like, I was eager to begin my adulthood and experience independence. My mom was really sad and worried, as I was her youngest and last to leave the nest, but she and my dad were proud to see me growing up. I've always had anxiety, so they promised they would visit me once in a while to make sure I had food and soap. My roommates were both guys, about my age, and growing up with only sisters, it was like having the brothers I never had. They were both really caring and genuine, and we quickly became good friends. We were all going to the same school, so it was easy for us to commute together and participate in the same events together, as our schedules matched up. Matt was a sociology major, and we spent endless hours gaming and chatting into the morning and weekends. Damien was getting a psychology degree, and he was always reliable for help with anything. Leaking faucet? Call Damien. Boyfriend dumped you? Damien will talk to you. He was an all-around great guy, and we joked about him being the dad of the house. It was about 4 months after I moved in that I started to see it. My bedroom was at the back of the house, which was likely used as a nursery before it was repainted, considering the leftover animal wallpaper in the closet. The house itself, I believed, was built in the 60s, and converted into suites likely when the original boomer owners moved out. The head of my bed was under the window, while the foot was towards the closet doors. Sometimes when I was sleeping, I would wake up thinking I heard talking. It sounded like two people whispering. Whenever I would open my eyes and turn on my lamp though, there was never anyone there. I remember after being kept up all night by the whispers, I got super mad at Matt and Damien for staying up so late talking, but they both denied it was them. It was creepy, and they were both creeped out about it. The first nights I actually saw the thing was when I stayed up studying. I was at my desk, which faces away from my closet, and I had headphones in. Checked my phone, and it was 1 a.m., and I decided it was time to finish up. As I was closing my books, I could hear the whispering again through my headphones. It was creepy because this time I knew I wasn't dreaming. I took my headphones out and turned around. In my closet there was a creature thing. The first word that popped into my head when I saw it was skinwalker, because it was naked and pale and vaguely humanoid. It had huge black eyes, an elongated face, and it crouched in my closet on very long bony limbs. As I stared at it, I slowly just walked towards my door, never taking my eyes off it. However, as I started to move out of sight, I could see its long fingers reaching around the wall as if to follow me. I just flew the door open and ran into Damien's room. He was asleep and I jumped on him in the bed, screaming for him to wake up. He obviously was confused, but when I told him there was something in my room, he jumped up and I followed him hesitantly back to my room. He spent a few minutes looking around, looking under the bed and in the closet, but the thing was gone. I was so frightened though that he let me sleep in his bed while he slept on his bedroom floor. We eventually concluded that the stress from school was getting to me. I slept on the couch for a few days, but eventually decided it wasn't real, and went back to my own bed. Within a week of going back, the voices woke me up again. It sounded like there were 2 or 3 people sitting in my closet, arguing with each other. But it was just quiet enough that I couldn't make out what they were saying. Whenever I checked, there was never anyone there. I eventually landed on the conclusion that I was experiencing some form of sleep paralysis. The next time I saw the creature was after I had awoken to the whispering. Like so many other nights, I turned on my lamp and got out of bed, expecting to see no one when I opened my closet. I screamed when I pulled back the door, and the skinwalker thing was there, within 6 inches of my face, smiling at me. Both Matt and Damien came in, and Damien again let me sleep in his room because I was so frightened. We had a house meeting, and decided that because it was my closet triggering my sleep paralysis, Matt offered to switch rooms with me. Again, these guys were some of the nicest people I've ever met, and they were both genuinely concerned about my mental health. Around Christmas time, Matt and Damien were both out of town with family. I stayed over at my parents' house for a few days too. When I went home on Boxing Day, it was late. I was still spooked about the house in general, so being alone made me feel uneasy. Every creak the wood made my heart skip. I couldn't fall asleep because I was terrified that when I opened my eyes, the skinwalker would be there. I passed out eventually, and woke up to scratching on my bedroom door. We don't have any cats or anything, so I immediately started panicking. I rolled over to grab my phone off the nightstand when I realized crouching on my floor, watching me, was the skinwalker. It was sitting there, almost smirking, watching me panic. My phone was right next to its head. I don't know if it was because I was tired, or terrified, or angry that this thing kept staring at me, but I asked it, "What do you want?" It cocked its head as I spoke, and looked like it was thinking. After a few seconds, it opened its mouth very wide, and the whispers came from its mouth. It was the voices of several people coming from its mouth, but it just held its mouth open, like some kind of speaker. The exact same voices that were coming from my closet. I hid under my blankets because I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. Eventually the whispering stopped. The scratching stopped eventually too. I didn't sleep, just stayed under the blanket waiting to die essentially. When my roommates came in, I told them about it. Damien suggested I see a counselor, because he believed it was due to my stress, and I agreed. My counselor basically told me I should see a psychiatrist first, as what I was experiencing was very concerning. When I saw my psychiatrist, she interviewed me for about an hour, and then told me she believed I was schizophrenic. That was really scary, as I have no family history of mental illness, and I was convinced it was just anxiety. She gave me medication to try, and that was it. The first night on the medication was the best sleep I had ever had in that house. I heard no voices all night, and I actually felt safe and calm. I had my doubts that I was actually schizophrenic, because what I saw was so real. But since I started the meds, I haven't heard the whispers or seen the skinwalker. I was hesitant to tell Damien and Matt about what the psychiatrist said. I was worried they would think I was crazy or dangerous, like I thought schizophrenic people were. At the time, I also didn't think I had it, as I still thought it was just anxiety. However, it didn't matter much, because I didn't really see much of Damien or Matt after that. I would see them milling about the kitchen from time to time, or hear them in the bathroom, but they both seemed to constantly be getting ready to leave to go out. I was worried they had somehow found out about it, and were avoiding me on purpose. After about a month, I came home from school, to find both Matt and Damien's rooms were empty. Completely empty. Like there was no trace they were ever there. There wasn't even a crumb on the bedroom carpet. I was so hurt that they left. That they didn't tell me they were leaving. I felt betrayed. I felt it was somehow my fault. My mom came to visit that afternoon, and I expressed to her how upset I was about my roommates leaving. I remember she looked confused, and asked me some dumb questions like, "What did you say their names were?" And, "How long were they here?" My mom and I set up a meeting with my landlord to talk about how my rent would change with them gone. Now at the time, I was in full denial about my condition. I thought I was just stressed out and needed to sleep more, but when I met with the landlord, I changed my mind. He told me my rent wouldn't change, because my living circumstance hadn't changed. Nobody had moved out, because nobody else had lived there with me. It blew my mind. It made me question everything. I didn't know what to do, and to be honest, I had a major mental health crisis. I'm better now, but I thought I would share my story. My family knows, and I'm living a much more stable life now. To Matt and Damien, I know you're not real, but you truly were great friends. You taught me how to be emotionally strong, how to have good humor in poor circumstances. I'll never forget you, and I'm sorry I couldn't actually meet you. I've worked as a cop for nearly 2 decades. I've seen some messed up stuff in my day. Anything from gut-wrenching vehicular accidents to victims of what could be deemed as a Jason Voorhees attack. I've seen every imaginable kind of crime. I've seen many kinds of human organs I'm not supposed to see in person, at least not in a fresh state. I've seen everything, literally everything at this point. I can say that the passage, "What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun," applies to me very much. Nothing surprises me anymore. Well, almost nothing. There was this one time when something caught me off guard when I thought I had seen everything there is to see under the sun. I thought it would be just another day because I was so confident in myself, because I was so confident in my experience with the scum of the earth. I was terribly wrong that one time. On the 22nd of December 2015, I was called in to check out an apartment. The neighbors had complained about an awful smell that was present in the apartment a few days without being tended to. I expected some junkie or alcoholic not noticing a bad leak or something. Though if I'm being honest, I was aware of the possibility an elderly person had died in that apartment with no one noticing. I was right about someone dying in that apartment. I was wrong about everything else. Instead of it being some old person who had died because of natural causes, it was a 30-something-year-old man who died because of, well, I don't know. No one knows really. It's a cold case. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Anyway, we received the call and then made it to the apartment block. The putrid smell was striking all the way from the stairway leading up to the 3rd floor, on which the apartment was located. I'm surprised the residents hadn't called us earlier. It's not like one gets to enjoy the stench of iron mixed with spoiled eggs from their floors below every day. I swear, with each passing step upwards, the smell got worse. It was so bad my head began throbbing by the time the door of the apartment was in sight. Jan, one of the boys that were with me, wasn't too pleased with the odor. He banged as hard as he could on the door for a while, demanding the owner of the apartment to open it. The door swung open on the 3rd or 4th time his fist made contact with it. That was suspicious, to say the least. I instinctively grabbed my gun, but I didn't pull it out. Just had my hand on it in case something might go wrong. All 3 of us called out to the owner of the apartment, and we cautiously made our way inside. No sound came back. The moment I entered the apartment, I felt like I was being punched repeatedly in the face by that disgusting odor. My eyes were watering. I screamed out for the owner, demanding to know what was the source of the rancid stench. Jan found the source of the smell. It wasn't a pleasant sight to say the very least. I could hear it in his voice. It was shaky. Uncharacteristic. That man's usually behaving like a modern-day Viking, but at that moment his voice was shaky, like that of a scared child. Found it. His voice trailed off as me and Chris made our way towards the guest room. I wanted to throw up when I saw it. I felt my stomach twisting and turning into a spasming knot. I felt my lunch going upwards. There was this guy, completely flayed. Someone had stripped the skin off his body. He was just seated there against the wall, all covered up in dried, darkened blood. It was awful. I couldn't handle the sight, but I simply couldn't look away either, so I just stared at it for about a minute while Chris and Jan just stood there with me, speechless. The 3 of us just stood there dumbfounded and almost mesmerized by this lump of meat in front of us. Hell, the guy being skinless wasn't the worst part of it. His skin was placed back on him like it was some kind of suit. It had this sickly yellow tint to it. I'll never forget that image. I can never forget the image of a skinless man with his own skin draped over his body like a suit. No matter how hard I try, it always creeps up to me in the back of my mind. It's something that sticks with a man for life. Hell, I still even remember that goddamn smell. Once I finally managed to pry my eyes away from the abomination, I noticed that the wall behind him was covered in a text written in blood. There were a bunch of short phrases all over. Help me. I'm stuck. I don't belong here. Help me. Help. Hell. God. Let me out. Let me out. Help, please. Shapeless things. There was one piece of text that made my insides turn upside down. The letters were tiny, so small I had to walk over to the wall and look at it up close to make out what was written. I wish I hadn't. I wish I didn't read that piece of text. It said, they are peeling it off of me, before trailing off into larger letters that spell, "Kill me." I felt the hair all over my body standing up as I stared at the wall. In my mind, someone was sick enough to flay a man, dress him up in his own skin, and then also use his blood to try to make it look like some supernatural crap. That thought alone made me both sick and scared. Few people are capable of such vile brutality. I say this because the amount of work needed to flay a human so precisely isn't something criminals would bother with. If some mobster wanted to torture him, it would have looked far messier. Same with most murder-happy folk. I was trying to process the whole ordeal. The wall began moving towards me. It took a moment to notice at which point I fell flat on my ass, blurting out a barrage of F-bombs, prompting my partners to stare at me like some rookie. I screamed that I saw the wall moving towards me, but they didn't believe me. Chris called the station to report our findings and to call for backup. At the same time, Jan helped me back to my feet and made me look around the house with him. We found nothing inside. Absolutely nothing. I swear I could see this black spherical mass in one mirror, and it had this creepy cartoonish face on it. 2 white orbs for eyes, and a long white slit with jagged edges for a smile. It startled me, forcing me to blink. Once my vision refocused, it was gone. It was just a mirror. We found nothing in that apartment. Literally nothing. It was clean. After a whole investigation of the ordeal, nothing was found. One day the owner was fine. 6 days later, he was a hellspawn from Hellraiser. Just like that, out of the blue, a guy was murdered by getting flayed alive in his apartment with no one noticing. Just like that. Nobody even complained about any fighting noises or ungodly screaming as one would expect. It was as if he suddenly just dropped dead, in a very painful and disturbing fashion, but still as if it happened in a flash. I told Jan about the mirror thing when we were out of there, but he says it's probably me being shocked for the first time in years that led me to imagine things, and I took his word for it. I didn't think about it until 2 days ago, when we received another call at our station regarding the same apartment. This time, strange noises were coming out of there at night, according to the residents. There shouldn't be any noises coming out at night. As far as I know, nobody has lived there since the flayed guy. I must tell this story before they find me. I'm writing this on a library computer on an account I made to tell the story. For this story to make sense, there's 3 things about me to keep in mind. I'm a female, I lived in Tucson, Arizona my entire life, and I speak fluent Spanish. Back in 2016, I lived in a small apartment near 12th and Valencia, the same main street as the airport, and if you go several miles down Valencia, you can visit the Saguaro National Park. Though the street more or less becomes off-roading past Wilmont, it's more or less a straight line. My boyfriend I lived with in the apartment knew this, and thought we should spend a day out there. We took his old truck out there. I'm not an expert on automobiles in any form. All I know is that it was a Chevy, and my boyfriend, we'll call Adrian, would often talk about the lift kit he put on it, so that it was raised even higher off the ground. If I asked him, he could probably give a lot more details on that truck. But that's not important to the story. All that really needs to be known is that it's great for off-roading, and we often went up on the mountains together in it. It was a cloudy day in November. I'd say it was still probably 80 or so degrees out when we went to spend the day at the national park. We'd been planning it for ages, and I was really excited for this, but that was all going to change. I remember this, since it's been haunting me for nearly 3 years. We had spent the majority of the day hiking and smoking weed in an assortment of different locations, just enjoying the cacti and the snacks we brought along. It was starting to get late. It was getting on to be winter, so it was dark at around 5 p.m., and yet we weren't even back in the truck at about 8 p.m. We were sat inside. The truck was off with the windows open. I was hitting a bowl when Adrian put his hand up. Having thought he wanted some, I was about to offer it to him. Before I could speak, he put his hand over my mouth and held up a single finger. Having been sat in the dark for hours, my eyes were well adjusted, and the glow he pointed out to me in the distance took all of my attention. What appeared to be some sort of firefight was about 100 or so meters in front of us, but behind us was a sound of movement. It was like a group of animals thrashing about. Adrian turned on the truck, keeping the headlights off, to roll up the windows, before promptly turning it back off. I was so out of it at the time, I wasn't really sure what was happening. All I was really sure of was that we needed to keep quiet and remain alert. When the thrashing sound came closer, it was apparent that it was stomping and chanting. They were clapping and chanting about Santa Muerte. Now Adrian doesn't speak Spanish, though he's full Mexican. He just never learned, so I ended up whispering the translation to him. It was like one of those prayers on the candles you can buy. It spoke about asking the Holy Death for blessing, but I don't remember what they wanted very clearly. What I do remember was the slam of a hand on the hood of the truck, and the wild eyes of a boy. He looked to be somewhere between 17 and 20, not very old, but not a young teen either. He had white paint around his dark eyes, and it haunts me in my dreams. To the best of my knowledge, this boy was all who knew of us in that moment. Adrian swore, but he didn't move. Instead, he just watched the boy, and I watched him. Adrian has always been the type of guy who's confrontational, and he's always been insistent on solving any issues we face. And being someone who hates confrontation, I was rather reliant on him to face issues for me. The boy yelled for others to surround the truck in Spanish. In the moment, something in me snapped, and keeping my eyes trained on the mirror on the passenger side, I told him to reverse. Darting my eyes back and forth between the boy and the figures coming out from the cacti, as Adrian reversed and turned in a huge jerky motion, before hitting the uneven road. We were originally just parked at the side of the road. The feeling of being watched, hunted even, compelled me to tell him to head downtown, where we ended up spending a few hours at Shot in the Dark, a cafe that's long since closed. For 2 months following that night, I gradually got more and more paranoid about it, and thought Adrian tried to convince me that I was overreacting, and there was no chance we'd ever encounter them again. I just couldn't believe him, despite how desperately I wanted to. It was when we were nearing 3 months since that night, when the previously fixed hand dent was back, and heavily multiplied. It was like dozens of hands tried to peel the metal back to get in. I haven't had any other events since Adrian had his truck fixed and sold, but recently he bought a similar one, and the paranoia has been seeping back into my bones. When I'm not at work, I don't leave my house unless I'm going to be indoors, because I can't risk them finding me again. The thought of them finding me vulnerable, alone or not, it leaves me shaken. I can't remember what they wanted, but I remember the way he smiled when he mentioned wanting to get into the truck, and to have us surrounded, and I would rather I never found out what he planned that night. It started about a week ago yesterday. I still don't know how it took so long for me to catch on. I guess I now know what's been going on. I am a 22-year-old female. I've been told I am pretty, and I don't have any trouble getting a date. But I am not pretty enough that I get second looks on the street. Besides the usual attraction of youth, there are my icy blue eyes, thanks to my mom, and jet black hair, thanks to my dad. I am a soon-to-be college graduate with a business degree from a mid-level university. Although I've had professor after professor tell me they don't see how it will be practical in the real world. You see, I'm totally deaf. Yes, in both ears. I hear nothing. I lost my hearing as a toddler. Even with that minor hurdle, I led a pretty normal, almost boring life. At least that was the case before. Now, not so much. One day I came home from work at my usual time. I let myself into my place and went about my normal weekday evening routine. I watched an episode from the DVR while I warmed up last night's leftovers before treating myself to a long bath. It was as hot as I could stand. I even went wild and threw a bath bomb and a glass of my favorite wine into the mix. That's when it first started. When I got out and grabbed my towel, it was still slightly damp. I felt a couple of moist spots before shaking my head. Odd but not alarming. After pulling back the blankets and crawling between the fresh clean sheets, I was out before my head fully hit the pillow. The next morning's incident was a bit more concerning. After stumbling out of bed, I shuffled from the bathroom to the kitchen to make some nectar of the gods. I'm useless without it. I stopped dead in my tracks when I opened the coffee can, and the measuring scoop that belongs in there was missing. Impossible. I never take it out. Even if I did, where would I have put it? I looked around the small apartment-sized kitchen. My confusion grew when my eyes rested on the dish drainer. There, set propped up to dry, was the coffee scoop. I examined it closely, though not sure why. Maybe I was expecting to find that it had sprouted legs or something. I don't know. I used it and tossed it back into the tin after finding no magical answers. At work, I found out that I was being given a raise. In the excitement, the coffee incident was the last thing on my mind when I walked in the door that Friday night from celebrating with a few friends. I had drank few too many, and felt like I needed to crawl into bed while I still could. A shower was out of the question, and even the drawer with my pajamas seemed too far to reach. Without hesitation, I tossed the clothes aside as I stripped out of them. Not even pulling back the blankets, I collapsed and fell into my alcohol-induced non-existence. The sun was already warming the room when I opened my eyes the next morning. Panicking a bit before remembering it's Saturday, I sat up and looked over at my useless blinds and the sun that pried its way in. That's when I noticed the other side of the bed. It looked as if someone had been laying there. Had it been me? I could swear it wasn't, but just in case I lost more of last night than I could remember, I looked over at the bathroom door. It was open. I got up and knocked before peeking my head in. No one was there. I went through the apartment but couldn't find the mystery figure to match the outline of the bed, guessing that it had to have been me. Though that conclusion was a stretch, it was time to get ready for the day. I was supposed to meet my sister for lunch, and I couldn't wait to tell her the news. But before I jumped in, the bathtub had another puzzle for me. It was wet. Glancing in the mirror, there was no question. I did not take a shower last night and just forget. My makeup was smeared all over my face, and the pillows I had been laying on. It hit me like a ton of bricks, almost running back into the bedroom. I picked up and examined the pillows on what is usually the unoccupied side of the bed. Nothing. No makeup at all. Yet the pillows I had slept on were splotched all over with it. What was going on? I immediately went around and checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked up tight. I had never felt so unsafe and uncertain as I did right then. Not knowing what else to do, I pushed it all to the side and carried on with my day's plans. After a lot of internal debate, I told my sister Lindsay about that morning. She looked concerned, but seemed to shake it off, signing, "You know how you get after a night out. You probably just forgot about bringing someone home," and he got up, took a shower, and locked up after himself like a gentleman. I gave her a shut-up look, and we both laughed. I was willing to buy it. At least it was some type of plausible explanation. That didn't last long, though. Getting home, I went to put the lunch leftovers in the fridge. Opening it, there was groceries I hadn't bought. Milk, sandwich meat, a new can of coffee, beer, freaking Fruit Loops. Not to mention the bread suddenly on top of the counter. I screamed and backed away before darting out the back door. Once I was locked safely in my car and sitting in my driveway, I started attempting to pull myself together. When I could breathe again, and was sure I wasn't going to hyperventilate myself into unconsciousness, it was time to do something. My first thought, of course, was to contact the police. Picking up the phone, I opened the app before a question crossed my mind that stopped me in my tracks. What was I going to tell them? Someone broke into my house and bought me groceries, used my bathtub and towel, laid on my bed. I had cash lying on the counter. My purse was there while I slept. My jewelry, electronics, everything. All available but still there. What sense did that make? I again started to lose it. It took 20 minutes or so before I could stop shaking enough to text my sister. She came over right away. I was glad I hadn't called the police because I felt paranoid and delusional enough just explaining it to Lindsay. We went through the apartment, room by room, looking in my bedroom, bathroom, the living room, coat closet, even behind the drapes. We checked all locks on the windows and engaged the deadbolt on the front door. Even though I could tell that Lindsay was going through the motions more to help calm me more than anything else. She was the parent checking under the child's bed for monsters. By that time, it was already late, and she said she would just sleep over for the night in my guest room. I was beyond grateful. I think I slept better that night than I had all week. The next morning we got ready, and decided that I needed a mental health day. We stopped in and got a manicure and pedicure, grabbed lunch at her favorite restaurant, and then decided to do some shopping. I was walking by an electronics store when I got a great idea. I wasn't going to be able to let it go until I found out what was really going on. I went in and bought some of the lower grade security cameras that could wirelessly send feed that you watch on your phone or laptop. I instantly felt less vulnerable. Lindsay suggested staying over that night after the new cameras were set up. I told her that there was no need. She still texted me when she got home to make sure everything seemed to be going okay. I told her that it was, or so I believed. Sunday's usually my nuh-uh day. If asked if I want to, we'll do anything. The answer is usually nuh-uh. That normally includes even getting dressed. Naturally, I was smiling as I sat up and stepped out of bed, heading for the bathroom. I wasn't able to hold the urge back, however, when I walked in and in my cup was a second toothbrush. Water still dripping off of it. Without thinking, I ran into my front room and brought up the cameras. I almost passed out as I watched what played out on the screen. It was me, going through my nightly routine, and he was simply feet from me, all night. The cheap cameras were clear enough. There was my coworker Eric, who had asked me out a time or two, and I had turned down. He was careful, but never very far. He knew I couldn't really see him, so that all he had to do was stay out of my line of sight. And that was something he had evidently mastered. I ate dinner. He stood in the kitchen, where he could see me, but not be immediately visible if I turned my head suddenly. You could see his mouth moving. He seemed to be talking to me, knowing that I couldn't hear him. If I went to the shower, he would go through my most personal things. I watched him stand by the television in the living room with his phone, recording me coming out of the shower and dressing. At night after I fell asleep, he would lay down on the floor beside my side of the bed. I guess he learned his lesson after being bold enough to lay beside me the nights I came home drunk. He was even circling around me as I took a late nap on the couch. When I came back from walking out to get the mail, he was just behind the front door. My house was his at night, or when I had gone out. My blood ran cold when I switched views to the spare room, when I watched him open the window and disappear this morning as I woke up. Nothing after that. He just slipped away. I shivered almost uncontrollably before deciding to post here. Something to keep my mind off of what was going on. Wait, as I sit here and type, I saw movement in the glare of the screen. He's standing right behind me. I don't think that he can see what I'm typing. What should I do? For some context, we're gonna have to go back a little. It was 2016 when I moved into this house. Me, my brother, and my mom. From the start, things have just been off. The first occurrence was before we even moved in properly. It was still in the decorating stage. Bare floors, the old owner's wallpaper peeling from the walls. We did all the decorating ourselves as at that point, we couldn't really afford any decorators. I decided to go with a pale blue/gray for my room, and my brother went with a dark gray. A gray that my mother complained about. She said, "It's too dark, you'll have no light." My brother always liked his room dark though. It was late at night and I had been painting all day. I was really impressed at how clean of a job I had done, considering back then I was only 16. I remember my mom yelling upstairs to get ready to go back to the old house, as the house we were moving into wasn't quite suitable for living in yet. I put the lid on my paint, set down my roller, and left my room. We locked up, went back home, and the next night we came back. I didn't help my mom elsewhere this time, as I was eager to finish the painting in my room. I got to my room and everything looked normal, just like any other day. Only this time when I looked down at the floor to the painting tray, where my roller lay, my heart dropped. I remember the sudden urge of panic coming over me. What was I looking at? It was impossible. At my feet was a handprint in the paint, made from my brother's paint, one much larger than mine, or my mother's, even my brother's. The first thing I did was check my brother's room. There was nothing. His paint was where he left it. I asked him if he was trying to play a prank on me, and he was as confused as I was. I couldn't find any reasonable sense for it. My brother's room was down the hall, the stairs separating both of our rooms. There was no way the paint could have been anywhere near my room. I was so confused that I used a new tray, and I left the handprint to dry. I still have it in my attic. That was the first thing I couldn't understand. It makes the hairs on my arms stand up even thinking about it. Soon enough the room was ready to move in, around 3 weeks after it happened. Nothing else seemed to occur, so slowly but surely it didn't cross my mind. And I just went on like any other house I'd lived in. Until one night, after living there for around 4 months. Our dog was a few months old then. He started barking at the back left corner of our living room while we were sat around having a family movie night. His hair began to stand up. My mom believes in spirits, and that animals can see things that we can't. She looked at me and said, "Take a picture with your iPad." I was skeptical and we kinda laughed and joked about it as I unlocked my iPad and opened the camera. I didn't even have time to take a picture. I lifted my iPad while looking at the screen, and I panned around to where the dog was barking. I froze. I wanted to run, but I was too afraid. Every part of my brain screamed run, but I couldn't. I just looked at my mom. She told me I'd turn pale white. That night I spent 3 hours outside on the curb, refusing to come back in. When I looked at the screen of my iPad, across the corner I saw a gray figure. No features or anything. Hardly even a body. The head and the shoulders were outlined perfectly. It just walked across the corner. Then it was gone. It happened so fast. I'd never seen a ghost before. So yeah, it messed me up pretty bad. I couldn't believe what I saw was actually a ghost. A few months had passed and nothing really happened. And again my paranoia of sleeping alone in my room at night wore away. My mom had made friends with an old lady across the road. She's the typical chatting woman, with a lifetime of stories. In conversation it had come up who the previous owners of the house were. The old woman told us it was a man called Matthew. He got really sick. So sick that he couldn't use the stairs, so he moved into the bedroom downstairs. He had his bed in the back left corner. She told us that because sometimes she'd care for him. He passed away in his bed, exactly where my dog barks. This made me a little bit relieved, because I knew it wasn't like a demon or anything. It's just a spirit who happens to be here. Then nothing happened until yesterday. I got out of the shower. It was around 12 as I was drying in the bathroom, which is right next to my room, and I heard a deep voice. Matthew. Chills ran down my spine. There was no one here with a voice that deep. It couldn't have been the spirit of Matthew. He couldn't call out his own name. Who else is here with us? What else?